two, 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 two. Check. Sibilance. Sibilance. What's up, everybody? Good day, good afternoon, good morning. Even though obviously it's not warning right here in the official time zone, the one true time zone, Eastern Standard Time. It's 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's 1:15 a.m. Pyongyang time. These are the two time zones we acknowledge on this program. If you don't like it, you can get out. No, I'm just joking. Please don't go. Please don't go. How is everyone doing today? This fine day. It's a mild winter day here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. 1 degree Celsius. John's got a lot of wind. Dakadoon's got rain. Jack's eating rainbow sherbet. That sounds nice. Is Pyongyang time equal to China time? I'm actually not sure. We should check in on that. We should check that. From what I understand about geography, I'm going to say yes, but I'm not totally. I don't know that for a fact. I'm not going to pretend that I know that for a fact. Yeah, China has multiple time zones. That's right. I'm excited. Tomorrow, my partner and I are traveling to Leicester to see Stuart Lee live. Very nice. King Window, the girlfriend haver. Yeah, we see how it is. Check this guy out. He's got a girlfriend over here. Huh? Huh? We got a busy couple of days. The next 2 days, we got a lot to talk about. Excuse me. Sorry. I cracked open my first Diet Coke of the day, but this is the result. I apologize. Very rude of me. Very rude. So today, obviously, we're going to do a little bit of chit chat, of course, but just wanted to set a little bit of a agenda. Set a little bit of an agenda. I wanted to talk about that Seymour Hersh story about the Nord Stream pipeline. We're going to get into that. And there's a new Brian Becker video on China and the new Cold War and the whole balloon incident. So I want to watch that as well. That's going to be today. It's going to be 2 days in this kind of new Cold War coverage. Like I've said before, I think the whole new Cold War, it's been one of probably the primary geopolitical story that we've talked about going on 3 years now on this show. It's just been the main kind of theme that we always go back to. So I think that's going to be, and like when we talk about Russia and Ukraine, when we talk about Taiwan, when we talk about the fucking balloon, that's all part of that same kind of narrative, right? But I think to really kind of specify that, that's what we're going to be getting into today. And then tomorrow, of course, we've got Radio Free Amanda coming on the show, and we're going to have a conversation about China and Russia and Ukraine and the balloon and the new Cold War and all this stuff. So we got 2 days of an extensive deep dive into this kind of subject matter. And I think today too, talking about China watchers are pivoting back to Tibet discourse again. Well, and I saw as well that UN tweet about we're concerned about Tibetans being taken away from their culture and they really use the term residential schools as well. They make sure to use that term. So we understand that it's exactly like the genocide that Canada committed, right? Or America. They use that exact same terminology. And then they share images of these kids in schools with learning Tibetan, learning the Tibetan language and writing in it in textbooks and seeing it on the walls, while trying to make the link between what China is doing in Tibet with settler colonialism, using that kind of language. I think that's a very specific terminology that they're using to make that link. And as when we see that actual images of the kids learning Tibetan indicates that it's absolutely nothing like what the American and Canadian residential school system for Indigenous peoples were. Is no comparison whatsoever. Considering there's clearly, whether you think it's good enough or not, there's a deliberate effort to keep these cultures intact and to respect these cultures.
And have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Well, Don Dark Zoni, thanks for the gifted sub to Comrade Social Distancing, who I did think I was sure just resubbed the other day, like yesterday, or the day before, but was somehow subless. Our friend Comrade Social Distancing. Thank you, Don Dark Sony. American schools only teach English no matter the regional makeup. Yeah, I mean, to say nothing of the settler colonialist aspect, but even today, when you have these like hugely diverse cities and places where many people speak Spanish and other languages, there's a deliberate effort to extinguish all of that in the public school system. Something else I can bring up with Amanda as well tomorrow. Looking forward to that, and really looking forward to that conversation. It's going to be great. So, yeah, and I think it's important that we're going to talk about the Nord Stream pipeline as well as watching the Brian Becker video. And I think it's interesting when we talk about this new Cold War, how when you're in that context, thinking about Ukraine, just similarly to in the last Cold War, these hot fronts would open up. And that's kind of what Ukraine is, right? It's like it's one of the fronts in this new Cold War. I think if you have two main fronts is Ukraine and Taiwan. But they're trying to use, Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, and all these different regions as different kind of wedges. But really, these are the two main fronts, so that's why I think it kind of makes sense thematically to kind of cover all these things. You don't hear much about that Nord Stream pipeline. Major news breaking about this. Major news breaking about this. And doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in mainstream media to cover that. Kind of funny, isn't it? Kind of interesting. Should we just dive into this? Should we even do chit chat today? Now that I've already started talking about it, do we need to go back to the chit chat, or do you think we should just forge ahead? What do we think? Yes, but the guy who's reporting it also said that the U.S. lied about Assad, and we all know that's impossible. Let's talk about another front in the Cold War, another hot front. Syria has been that for the last decade about, right? And there's really so many similarities to the Ukraine invasion and Syria, isn't there? the way that though Syria was a proxy war in the exact same way, we're arming and funding these proxies to fight in a civil war.
You can count
this
on
is
me
the classic
and that good old
imperialist
Rob
strategy.
to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Sikalufakis. 14 months of Prime from Sikalufakis. Thank you. Very kind of you. But yeah, it's another front where America and Canada was just like giving weapons and training to these like extremists, really, in an effort to fight a civil war and create and destabilize a regime that we wanted to, where we wanted to change the regime. The exact same model that they did with Libya, right? They wanted to do the exact same thing in Syria, only they just didn't allow it to happen, and Russia stepped in and just didn't allow it to happen. That was kind of the first shift, right? In this shift to multilateralism or multipolarity, whatever you want to call it. Our friend Vijay Prashad was talking to us about the other day and wanted to try and shift away from multipolarity to focus on multilateralism, because these other countries are not really trying to be hegemons. They're literally just trying to create a world where countries are free to engage with one another diplomatically and trade and not interfere with each other. But as we all know, that's not really going to be an option on the table, because even under that kind of framing, under that kind of framework, America is going to view any of that bilateralism or multilateralism as being a threat, a direct threat to them. This was the subject of State of Siege, the U.S. involvement in Uruguayan politics by training torturers and such. I'm glad. It's cool that you guys watched that. I've never seen the movie, Doc. But this is this has been the strategy all over the world. Like, this is what makes me start to feel a bit crazy when we start pointing this out. When we point it out in Syria and be like, I don't think America should be arming proxies to fight in this civil war. Even these extremists that were training to fight this civil war. And then, of course, when this civil war breaks out, we use the violence that inevitably ensues in this war to say, like, how can you possibly support this brutal dictator that we're trying to remove here, right? And it's just the same strategy every single time. And it becomes strange when I think it's just like, it becomes controversial on the left to be like, I don't think that we should be supporting the arming and training of these extremist proxies. Whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Syria, whether it's in Libya, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in El Salvador or Nicaragua, I just don't think we should be doing that, But it still trips people up. It still becomes very difficult. Been trying and failing with Iran, yes. It becomes very difficult for people to notice this pattern, this very obvious pattern, and it becomes controversial. And if you're against this, well, that means you support Assad or you support Putin, or in a serious case, you support both Assad and Putin, because Russia was, of course, that was the moment where they kind of stepped in to officially kind of declare on a global stage that they weren't just going to allow the Americans to go in and do whatever they wanted. And noticing as well, we know about this history, right? The suffering Syria has been subjected to over and over is hard to fathom. Yeah, and now you have this horrible disaster happening on top of that. And we're not giving aid to Syria because we're still in this fucking imperialist regime change mindset. Like I was saying the other day, people have this idea of what they want to be the government there, which isn't the case, versus the government that's actually there, whether they like it or not. People just can't accept the actual reality of that. And we think by giving aid, that's somehow legitimizing this thing that we're so against. But the reality is that the government that's there is the one that's there. They're the one that need aid. And, talking about this shift to multilateralism, I saw China as well are making this argument on the global level. Like, America should be giving aid to Syria and stopping with this, lifting the sanctions on Syria to make it easier for them to confront this disaster. And so we know the history, right? We know the history of America, or the West, or the rules-based international order, or NATO, whatever you want to call it. It's America, right? America's the boss. America's the boss of this global crime syndicate, basically. We know the history of them arming and funding and training these proxies in all of these different places that I mentioned and elsewhere throughout the world, right? And we know the strategies that they've trained these extremists to use. And part of that, and we know this has been reported. Like, this is not even a conspiracy theory. This is just a factual thing that has been reported, like, by mainstream media. The CIA playbook in these places, teaching people and training people to kill civilians, bomb civilian infrastructure, create false flag attacks that they then use with their media arm to turn into this big global outrage, which they use to raise more support for their wars, right? Like, we know that this is the strategy. We've seen the CIA memos. Like, we've looked at this on this program. We've seen the CIA memos that describe intricately how to carry out these, like, heinous acts. And we've seen countless examples throughout the Cold War and throughout this history of arming these proxies, of these extremist groups carrying out these brutal attacks on civilians and doing terrible things. But then, when we notice the same thing happening in Syria or in Ukraine, both the arming and training and funding of these extremist proxies and these big media human rights kind of atrocity porn that gets played, that then people point to as, like, how can you possibly support these evil dictators? How can you not support our mission here to create peace in this region? And even then, even with this long history and with this obvious pattern, which you can just observe time and time again throughout the decades, you're still framed as, like, a conspiracy theorist for asking basic questions about the truth behind these incidents. And there's been a number of highly publicized incidents in both Syria and Ukraine that people have used to justify the endless arms transfers and the endless training and, like, the endless perpetuation of these proxy wars, right? You see this happening, and you still get called a dictator apologist or a genocide apologist when you start to question the truth of what is going on here. You know, and it's very frustrating. It is really frustrating. And it was the same thing with the Nord Stream pipeline, right? When it was obvious, like, when this happened, we talked about it, whether it was that day or the next day, whatever it was on this show, we talked about it. We can find the receipts. We can find the footage when it was all obvious to every single one of us, from me and every single one of you that's watching, all our lurkers and everyone knows that the United States blew up the pipeline. That was just very clear from moment one. But for some reason, we're still supposed to pretend that, like, oh, it's some mystery. Well, we don't know. We don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. You don't want to be a conspiracy theorist for, like, asking these kinds of questions. And, like, that's the thing when it comes to the Nord Stream pipeline, when it comes to highly publicized
this is some guy, Rob Russo, some
incidents
leftist based
in places
Canada.
like Syria or Ukraine.
Sick individual, and I found this.
Like, people treat you like you're a crazy person just for asking this basic question. Just for asking the question. Like, it would be criminal to not speculate on these things given this history that we know about. Zach, thank you very much for the raid. Zach, welcome, Raiders. Bring it on in here, Raiders. Bring it on in here, folks. Thank you, Zach, for the raid. I hope the stream was great today. Thank you for joining us. We're hitting the ground running today. Usually I like to do a lot of chit-chat. We're hitting the ground running. We got 2 big days over on TRRS, covering a lot of fronts of this new Cold War,
count on
right?
me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
We were talking about Syria. We're talking about the Nord Stream pipeline. We're talking about China and the balloon and Taiwan and all these different fronts in this new Cold War.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Who could stand to benefit from blowing up that Russian pipeline more than Russia invested billions of dollars in said pipeline? We're going to get into this. We're going to get into this, Johnny. A lot of ins, a lot of outs. Thank you, Don Dark Sony, for gifting a sub. And thank you, Cracklebearer, as well, for gifting a sub to Zach. Man, I wish it was summer here. Man. I wish it was summer.
You
But
can
this
count
is
on
the
me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Don Dark Sony. Thank you for gifting another sub. Thank you, Don Dark Sony. A lot of unknowns here. Here's the thing that I find frustrating about all this, though, is just that, like, knowing this playbook, like, whether it comes to the Nord Stream pipeline, whether it comes to the Uyghur stuff and the stuff with Xinjiang, whether it comes to all these highly publicized incidents in the gas attacks in Syria or the many incidents in Ukraine that have been used to justify this, like, further aggression and further arms transfers and no dialogue and all this stuff, that you get treated like a crazy person for asking these basic questions and just like noticing that these are part of a long-standing pattern that you can observe with these imperialist powers and their exact tactics that they use. How easily you can friggin' Hong Kong struggle for independence. You know, Johnny, I think Hong Kong was the first. That was like the first Matrix moment for me when it comes to this subject. When I saw the endless coverage of that, and I saw the ways that all the people like are just encouraged to get in. Yeah, so you see the protesters. Of course, we've got to support the brave protesters, and the relentless narrative in the media about it. And that was one moment where I was kind of like, huh, this doesn't really feel right to me, but I feel a little weird speaking up about it because of how passionate everyone seems to be about it. So I'm just going to be silent on this. And then it's been just noticing these things happening more and more frequently. And it's been a process for me of becoming a little bit more comfortable each time this comes up, for every year that goes by, being a little bit more comfortable voicing my my confusion, my skepticism about some of these things. You know, because people get very upset when you start asking these questions, right? Whether it's about Hong Kong, whether it's about the Uyghur stuff, whether it's about Tibet, whether it's about Ukraine, whether it's about Syria.
You can count on me.
You know,
You're gonna
people
have
get
good
very
old
upset.
Rob to talk you through all this.
Ryalan86, thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you. Same, I started seeing a ton of conservative figures actively supporting Hong Kong-related news and the xenophobia. That was my breaking point, too. Yeah, and you see the student protest leaders meeting with like fucking Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and stuff in the States. And like, to me, it's like, it becomes clear at that point, you know, what is going on. But for some reason, it's still very difficult for people. Yeah, you got students fighting cops. It must be progressive. You know, just like fucking Tiananmen Square. What about the Azov guys that were invited to their protests? What's that? There's so many different factions, doesn't condemn the entire thing. This is what I mean. It's like color revolutions. Like when you see things going on that fit the playbook of a color revolution that we've seen time and time and time again, you know? And when you see it start to happen, you say, hey, is this maybe a color revolution or an attempted one? And you get treated as a conspiracy theorist despite this long-standing pattern. What is your Hong Kong take? I mean, I don't really have a take about it other than like there's a reason why these Hong Kong protests became a massive media sensation, and it became a big social media thing, and you heard about it on the news every night. And there's a reason why the media and these social media campaigns take off for certain places, while similar protests in allied countries don't get the same attention or any attention at all. So I think that number one is one example that should indicate to you when you have mainstream press in the West latching onto these kinds of protests and breathlessly showing the protest footage every night while ignoring similar protests and elsewhere, you know that this is being done for a specific geopolitical reason. In this case, it's just part of a effort to, I think, destabilize China and to demonize China for people in the West. Not the Arab Spring, thank you. Not because people in the West or our ruling class care about people's human rights, or they care about having a police state, or they care about any of these like things that they claim, democracy versus authoritarianism, or whatever they claim to care about. the reason that we talk about things are not for those reasons. It's because China is eclipsing us in terms of its economic ability, its stance as a geopolitical power, its role in leading global development. That's why. It's not because we care about these students or what their demands are, or we care about the evil CCP or whatever it is. So I think just when you see our media and our political class just instantly get laser focused on a movement like that, it's not because they've discovered some wellspring of support for democracy or that they care about people's human rights. It's happening for a totally different reason. And just like if you compare the Hong Kong protests to the George Floyd protests, for example, two big, highly publicized protest movements that were going on in the United States and in Hong Kong. Like you see there was footage every single night during those George Floyd protests of cops just mercilessly beating the shit out of people, committing massive aggressive acts on people, shooting people with tear guns from their cars, disappearing into people into vans. And like those Hong Kong protests like were rough, there was people fighting cops and stuff like that, but like there was compared to the way that Western cops deal with these kinds of protests, there was a lot more restraint being used than like what we ever see in the West. And we were being told in the West, like, look at these brutal, barbaric, authoritarian stormtroopers in here. And I was just, if Black Lives Matter protesters had been attacking cops in the way that like what we were seeing in Hong Kong, which our media was cheering on, of course, and throwing Molotovs at people and even like civilians and stuff. If Black Lives Matter protests were doing that, they would be getting shot in the street, and people would be celebrating. So I guess that was a point for me when I started to realize that there was kind of something going on, and I felt very uncomfortable articulating this stuff and expressing this. And over the years, I guess that was 2018, as we just more and more incidents kind of keep happening to add to this narrative, just the way that the narrative shifts, like it goes from Hong Kong and then it goes to Taiwan and then it goes to Xinjiang and then it goes back to Taiwan. And there's always like this pressure going on to create this narrative, and then it gets consumed by the left, and then you have these kind of like Western leftist anarchist academic types that start using language of like imperialism and decolonization when you're talking about Hong Kong or Xinjiang or these places, or turning Xinjiang into East Turkestan becomes some like decolonization thing. It's very strange when you kind of see this start to happen, and the more that I noticed it start to happen, the less comfortable I was with it, and the more that I wanted to start to push back on this narrative or start trying to figure out with this community actually what is going on. Why are these narratives happening? What's up, my friends that definitely are not in a cult? Hello, Liar Judas. That's absolutely right. No one here is in any kind of a cult. That is absolutely correct. Thank you for pointing that out. So obviously Ukraine has been, like, it's over the last year, the big flashpoint in this kind of power shift. Like, you can call it the new Cold War, you can call it multipolarity or multilateralism. That's what these narratives are about, though. It's about this emerging world. It's about America losing its stance. It's about America losing its kind of hegemonic status. It's about China becoming a global superpower economically, and again, leading development and outcompeting the West, becoming the biggest trade partner for Europe, becoming the biggest trade partner for Africa and Latin America. And a lot of that's what this narrative has been about. And I guess that's one interesting thing about Russia and Ukraine, is that I think China has really been the main enemy of Western imperialism. That's been clear for the last 5 years, but Russia kind of emerged with its interjection in Syria and now with Ukraine as being kind of like a different flashpoint in that. So again, going back to the Nord Stream pipeline, this is all part of the same sort of narrative, but going back to the Nord Stream pipeline, as we said, the day that it happened, I don't know if we can find the footage. I don't know if we can find the footage from the day after this thing happened, but it was obvious what happened. I talked about it with VJ the other day. I talked about it with VJ Prashad the other day. About this pipeline, how it's very clear. It's very clear what's going on, especially when you have Joe Biden specifically outlining exactly what happened. Just like open statements from public officials, elected officials in the United States. Let's roll the tape. Let's roll the tape. Like this to me.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this. You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Vlad and Praxid, thank you so much to the both of you for the Prime. 16 months from Vlad and 11 months from Praxid. Thank you to you both. Very much appreciated. Thank you. I know this new piece just came out with reporting on this from Seymour Hersh, which we're going to look at. But I'm no slouch either. I'm going to go try and do this bit again now that I've already spoiled it. I'm no slouch either, folks. I happen to have a couple of high-up sources in the U.S. government myself, and I can confirm the reporting on this. I've gotten some exclusive, explosive footage that will shock you of a high-level official in the United States government openly admitting that the United States government was indeed involved in the destruction and the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline. Are you ready for this? You ready for my exclusive, explosive footage? My source in the U.S. government? Okay, here we go.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that?
Let's just hear that one more time. From my source, my high-level source in the U.S. government. Okay? Let's hear this one more time.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it. If
wow, explosive breaking news here, folks. I suspect, I'm willing to go on record saying I suspect, given this evidence, that the United States government was involved in the sabotage and the destruction of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I'm breaking huge scoops over here. We're breaking big scoops over on TRRS. This is really exciting stuff. Yeah, I believe that that's what happened. Yeah. Conveniently, it just blew up and we didn't have to do anything about it. Things just work out. That's right. And all of this, like this whole Russia-Ukraine conflict and the destruction of this pipeline. And again, we're talking about what precipitated all this. China becoming the biggest trading partner for Western Europe. Number one. Should also talk about Germany getting cheap Russian gas. Like, this is German infrastructure. This is not, you wouldn't even qualify this as just Russian infrastructure. This is like a major German infrastructure project to get cheaper gas piped in from Russia. When we talk about Russian gas as well, you also have to talk about Ukraine, because in 2013, 2014, prior to the Maidan protest movement, another color revolution, which we were asked to support in the name of freedom, of democracy, and all this stuff, the same way we're always asked to when it was going on. Of course, it's not a regime change. Of course, it's not a coup. Of course, the CIA and the State Department's not involved. You got to support these brave freedom fighters in the Maidan. Well, what happened prior to that is that Ukraine turned down, under Yanukovych, the neutral and very corrupt Ukrainian leader, turned down a deal with the IMF and made a deal with Russia, because got a better offer from Russia, which also included cheaper gas getting piped in from Russia. And lo and behold, shortly afterwards, there's a Maidan protest movement in which he is overthrown and a pro-NATO, pro-Western government is installed. And then arms immediately start getting pumped into eastern Ukraine to these freedom fighters, and the CIA training and all of that stuff starts going to these freedom fighters to fight a proxy war in eastern Ukraine immediately afterwards. In another strange coincidence. All this stuff just fell into place. This is something else we're going to be talking about with Amanda, Radio Free Amanda, tomorrow. She just wrote a great piece about talking about debt trap diplomacy, about how Ukraine should be the primary example of debt trap diplomacy. And that's a big part of that puzzle piece. So not only does cheap Russian gas have to do with the beginning and the origins of that Ukraine conflict, or the modern version of it, but again, this is the same thing. Germany made a deal with Russia to get cheap Russian gas. Now their infrastructure has been bombed by the U.S., and the U.S. has said, like, no, you have to stop using this gas. You have to purchase fracked American gas at a higher price, get off of Russian gas, and also send tanks and antagonize and provoke Russia even further. And Germany this whole time has been saying, like, okay, I guess so. Yeah, I guess we will. And literally forcing Germany to just slit their own throats economically and politically and diplomatically, which is an example, a fucking textbook, picture-perfect example of imperialism in action. And right, when we're talking about imperialism in action, it's not Russia invading Ukraine, it's America overthrowing the Ukrainian government, adding fuel to this proxy war, forcing their allies to destroy their own economies at their behest. That's imperialism. It's not Russia invading Ukraine. So that's the amazing thing about this pipeline, though, is that America's just, they're so confident and they're so belligerently just like destroying their own allies' infrastructure and destroying their own ability to have, like, create bilateral or multilateral partnerships with other countries. And Germany's just going along with it. And that's how confident that they are, is that they can say, like, oh yeah, we're going to get rid of that pipeline. And then they just do it. And they pretend that it's some mystery. And that only to ask these questions makes you some kind of conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist. Hirsch also pointed out that it opens the market for gas from Norway. That's interesting. We should probably look at this piece now. I don't know, like, should we just read the piece, or is there a video that summarizes? What would be better, do we think? See, Rib, yes, they're definitely hurting the people of those countries, but the elected representatives of those countries are definitely getting a pretty sweet deal. Well, that depends on how much longer they are elected representatives, though. As I've been pointing out before, this is just going to empower the far right in places like Germany and France. You know, as they see the economic conditions and material conditions for people getting worse, that's where the right steps in and makes these kinds of anti-imperialist arguments, but then takes that very real anger and alienation that people are experiencing, and pulls them down this path of reaction towards, Jews, towards immigrants, and towards in the direction of fascism. Found Amanda's article. Okay, good. I will share it, but we're gonna talk more specifically about that tomorrow as well. So, I mean, I guess that's the point, though, is that this is pretty long. I guess we got a big day here doing this. Or, we have, how about maybe this would be better because it's shorter. This is Andy from Reports on China. And this is more of a concise video because I have a whole 40-minute clip to watch later as well. So I don't think I can do two 40-minute clips. But I guess that's the first thing, though, is that I just find it funny. I want to dig into this reporting, and maybe the Ben Norton video would be better. I don't know. Probably would. I want to dig into this reporting, but I just find it funny that, like, every fucking dumbass like me, who just knows a little bit about American imperialism and Western intervention, and has just paid attention to things that elected officials up to the fucking president of the United States have said in the United States, it was pretty obvious what happened from moment one. I'm glad that this reporting is getting out there, but I do find it kind of amusing that, like, it's months later and it's this big breaking story. I believe that the U.S. is involved in the sabotage of this pipeline. This guy seems to really like Canadian truckers for some fucking reason. I think there's certain people that, especially that live in the eye of this new Cold War, that just want to see the West be further destabilized and decline. I think that kind of explains some of those more reactionary tendencies. Especially the way, Trudeau and Biden use, like, COVID protests in China to destabilize China and to suggest that the government's illegitimate. I think that's why they end up making these kind of arguments. Anyway, so of course Ben comes right in with his clip right off the bat. White House said the blog post is fake news. Oh, okay, good. Well, I'm sure their investigation is still just ongoing, right? You don't want to have this kind of rumors and hearsay going around when America's doing a committed investigation into who blew up this pipeline and why. America's going to get to the bottom of this any moment now. I think they're still looking into who killed Shireen Abu Akleh as well. Remember, we heard them; they were going to do an investigation in that. I don't think we've heard much about that, but it just means they're taking their time and making sure they get all the evidence, and they're looking at everything. Anyway, I was thinking about Shireen the other day because that was one of those cases where, like, Biden and people in the United States State Department were like, they tried to use the tough language. This is not acceptable and disgraceful, and we need to look into it. And then they use the language and then just don't follow up on it, and they hope that everyone forgets about it, which, lo and behold, is precisely what happened. Yeah, they said, yeah, we did it with little fanfare. They were just like, yeah, okay, well, carry on. Okay, thank you for admitting it. Try not to do it again. And Israel's like, we are going to do it again. And we say, okay. Will you at least feel bad about doing it again? And they say, no, we won't. And we're like, all right. Anyway, here's this Ben Norton video about the pipeline. We'll get through this, and then we'll pivot to more balloon talk. The balloon video from Breakthrough News. Maybe I could do that tomorrow, and then have Amanda too. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Let's go.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2.
Ken Hammond is so cool.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
One of the world's most renowned journalists has reported that the United States government blew up the Nord Stream pipelines that were used to send Russian gas to Germany. This is according to Seymour Hersh, one of the world's most respected journalists. He's won all of the top journalism
It would be
awards,
cool if this just ripped
including
NATO
the
apart
Pulitzer
internally.
Prize, the top journalist.
Got to be careful with what I say here, though. But then, let's say that does happen. I would, and I think we all would, start to see some of the logic. I think when the invasion started, a lot of us were saying, what the fuck is Putin doing? Maybe it might become a little bit more clear if this does have this kind of a destabilizing effect on NATO.
Journalism award on the planet. He has reported over many decades for a variety of mainstream newspapers. He exposed U.S. government crimes in Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, Syria, and his latest report focuses on the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines. These were pipelines, technically they still exist, but they're just destroyed, that were built between Russia and Germany going through the Baltic Sea. And there are two of them. There are two sets of pipelines. Each has two pipelines. So there's 4 pipelines in total, but they're divided into 2 parts. First is Nord Stream 1, which was opened in 2011. And this was a decision that the German government wanted because Russia provided very cheap gas to Germany, which was used to power energy for homes, but especially for German industry. And German is a major industrial power. And then there was also Nord Stream 2, which was built over several years with billions of dollars.
I remember that one, carrier wave as well,
by European companies. And construction was finished in September 2021.
Interesting.
But the pipeline, Nord Stream 2 pipelines,
good thing Germany shut down
were
their nuclear
never
plants.
open.
That's right.
They were never officially used because the U.S. government threatened its so-called ally, Germany, with sanctions if they opened the pipeline and got more Russian gas to fuel their households and their industry. Now, in the past year, with the escalation of the proxy war between NATO and Russia, the U.S. was pressuring Germany to cut off all ties with Russia. And in September of 2022, the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up. And we had a lot of evidence pointing toward the U.S. government being involved. I did myself reports on that, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And we now have confirmation from one of the world's most respected journalists, Seymour Hersh. He published this in an article on February 8th, and it's called How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. And he ended up publishing it at Substack, the blogging platform. And this is a journalist who's won all the top awards. He's written for the New York Times and everywhere else. But the reason he ended up writing for Substack, he explained in a separate article. And in this article, he explained that he's had such a negative history of dealing with mainstream corporate media outlets that are always trying to censor him. He noted that when he won his Pulitzer Prize, it was very difficult. Now, his Pulitzer Prize, by the way, was for his expose on war crimes committed by the U.S. military in the Vietnam War. And he said it was very hard for him to get that story published. It was rejected by magazines. And then he said when the Washington Post finally published it, they littered it with Pentagon denials and the unthinking skepticism of the rewrite man. And then he also noted that since then, he's published many stories in mainstream outlets, winning awards. For instance, in 2004, he published the first stories exposing the torture of Iraqi prisoners by the U.S. military at the Abu Ghraib prison. And the Pentagon responded by saying that it was fake news, it was a false story, and the Pentagon smeared his journalism as a, quote, tapestry of nonsense. So there's a long history of the U.S. government trying to deny these objectively true stories. And Seymour Hersh has a track record of being correct again and again and again and again, and the U.S. government has a history of lying again and again and again. Seymour Hersh also points out that today big mainstream corporate media outlets like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News battle for sensational headlines instead of investigative journalism. And he said he decided to go to Substack because he's watched writer after writer on this platform as they freed themselves from their publishers' economic interests. And he emphasized the importance of freedom. So this explains why Seymour Hersh published this article at Substack. And I'm going to go through the main details of this report. It's pretty lengthy. I'm going to go through the main details for people who don't understand a lot of the context, because if you're new to this subject, it might confuse you. So I'll try to start from square one. He begins this article saying that In June of 2022, divers from the U.S. Navy, operating under the cover of a NATO military exercise called Baltops 22, they put remotely triggered explosives on the Nord Stream pipelines. And then 3 months later, in September 2022, they were blown up and they destroyed 3 of the 4 Nord Stream pipelines. And he said this was overseen by the U.S. Navy's Diving and Salvage Center, which is based in Panama City in Florida. Now, as I said, for people, I don't want to confuse you, there were technically 4 smaller pipelines that were part of 2 big pipelines, and it's part of one system. The entire system is called Nord Stream, and there's Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Nord Stream 1 has 2 smaller pipelines, and Nord Stream 2 has 2 smaller pipelines. So 3 of those 4 pipelines were destroyed. But again, I want to stress that.
I just wanted to say hi. We got a kind of an influx of viewers here. I just wanted to introduce myself to any lurkers, any potential new community members out here. I'm Rob. I'm a socialist Twitch streamer here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. We're covering the story about the United States blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, which is kind of, we speculated on this channel immediately afterwards that when it happened. But I think there was some actual reporting and confirmation on this from legendary journalist, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh. We're watching this video from Multipolarista getting into that story and talking about this new Cold War and where all these different puzzle pieces fit, you know, with the Nord Stream pipeline, with Syria, with Ukraine, with Taiwan, with the fucking balloon, you know. That's what we're talking about. That's what we talk about on this channel day in, day out. That's what we're talking about today. Please tune in tomorrow as well, because I'm talking to friend of the stream, Radio Free Amanda. She's going to come on. She does a lot of really good journalism and coverage of this kind of subject, talking about the hysteria over the balloon story, the spy balloon stuff. That's going to be really fantastic. And also smash the follow button. Smash the follow button if you want to participate in the chat or if you want to join the community. Here we go. Let's continue with this video. I don't know what this influx of viewers is. Maybe it's bots. Maybe it's like different. Maybe it's some kind of like NATO or CIA or NSA or CSIS or MI6 kind of bot farm. Maybe it's that. I have no idea, but who knows? But please do smash the follow button or the subscribe button if you want to support this community and support the channel.
Nord Stream 2 was never actually active. It was only Nord Stream 1 that was active because of the threats of US sanctions. Now, continuing with the story, Seymour Hersh points out that the divers who carried out this sabotage operation were only from the US Navy. It did not include members of Special Operations Command, and there's a reason for that. Because when covert operations include special ops, they must be reported to the US Congress and specifically to the leadership of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, and they're called the Gang of Eight. Those are the top congressional officials with insight over intelligence operations in the US. So the Biden administration intentionally chose not to use those forces and instead to keep it only with Navy divers so they wouldn't have to report it. Now, this explains why the White House and the CIA both have vehemently denied the story, claiming that it's false, it's a complete fiction. However, I should stress that according to US law, the White House and the CIA are legally allowed to lie about special operations. I noted this in a report that I
think generally, like, one of my main pieces of advice I would have, like, when you see the United States government talk about these things, is probably just to assume that they're lying first and foremost when it comes to this. Like, again, we looked at this at the beginning of this conversation. We looked at it at the beginning of this video. But when you want to talk about this Nord Stream pipeline, really all you need to do is look at this clip from Joe Biden himself, my exclusive source, my high-ranking source in the United States government, several months before the pipeline was blown up. I mean, it's not, you don't have to really be some kind of conspiracy theorist or investigative journalist to figure out what happened here. And when the United States government says, of course we didn't blow up the pipeline, we're looking into it and we want to find out who did just as badly as you do, I think it's safe to assume they're probably not being honest about that.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
It's funny to think about, like, imagine if Joe Biden himself had the whole, like, frog suit on. They dropped him in the dead of night with the night vision goggles and the frog suit or whatever. They dropped him from the helicopter. He's swimming into the pipeline, planting the bombs and stuff. Isn't that a funny image? They just want you to think that he's a weak and feeble old man. You know, that's part of his cover. He's a deep cover operative. Really, he's out there. The C4's planted, Jack. Exactly, yeah. Wouldn't that be great? Now watch this dive. There we go. Wouldn't that be funny if Biden was there with the frog suit on and everything?
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Dark Brandon on Dark Ops. Wow. Okay, Rob.
That's right. Black Cat Paradise. Thank you for the 12 months of Tier 1. Thank you very much. Dark Brandon is a go. Operation Dark Brandon. He's a maverick. That's right. They picked him to be president because he forgets right after. He's the perfect agent. Even if you were torturing him, did you blow up the pipeline, President Biden? Did you blow up the pipeline, sir? Jack, I don't have any recollection of that. I don't remember. But he's not even lying. It's telling the truth. He's not even lying. That's why he's the perfect person to select for these kind of deep cover missions. That's why he's the perfect operative. He's like Jason Bourne. His memory is wiped immediately after every operation. Italian Frenchman? That was a Russian. That was a Russian accent, actually. President Biden, sir. It was you. They're hooking like the car battery up to his genitals, just no reaction. Just like completely stone faces him. He does this face the whole time when they're zapping him. And if you are one of our new viewers or potential new community members, I do these kinds of accents often. I can seamlessly blend into any culture. You know, Russia, various parts of the United States, I got different British dialects. I can instantly vanish into any culture. Just so you know.
About the CIA and NATO carrying out sabotage attacks inside Russian territory. And that is according to a report that was done by an investigative journalist named Jack Murphy, who's a U.S. military veteran. And he pointed out in his report that Article 50 of the
Still haven't done a Yorkshire accent, though. Okay, I'll do this right now, okay? Oi, I'm from Yorkshire, innit?
U.S. Code, which is this U.S. government law, says clearly, this is the part of the code that involves presidential approval for covert operations. It notes that if the U.S. president decides that the covert operation is something very sensitive, the president only has to report that covert operation to the Gang of Eight, which is, again, the chairman and ranking minority members of the Congressional Intelligence Committees. So that is to say, according to this U.S. law, the president...
Oi, pass me one of them steak and kidney pies, Yorkshire style. I had to change all my voice pronieties after Rob aired his impression of me a few months back. That's right. Even members of this community. I can seamlessly mimic anybody. I want me beans for breakfast. And again, I would just please encourage, if this content is entertaining to you for some reason, please smash or just lightly press the follow button. If you want to toss me a follow, every little bit helps. And once again, hello to all our what I'm sure are probably bots tuning in today. But you know, if there might be a person in there as well, please join the community also.
And the CIA can lie about covert operations and legally deny existing covert operations, telling the media and the public a falsehood that they don't exist. If they think that it's
I guess this is
necessary
front page
for
material. I guess TRRS is now front page Twitch material. I've always known my time in the sun would come, and I'm thankful that Twitch recognizes the grind. Twitch recognizes the grind that I've been putting in to this program and this community. This is the only place where Nord Stream sabotage is front page news. That's right. Twitch is actually doing a valuable public service in this. Finally gets on the front page of Twitch. Immediately just starts doing accents. That's right. That's right. That's absolutely correct. That's how I hook you. That's how I get you. I get you with that kind of like silliness, right? And that's how I start to introduce my subversive and dangerous viewpoints. My subversive and dangerous viewpoints, folks. Folks, I disarm you with my silly efforts to use accents. And then I start saying all kinds of dangerous, radical, subversive things. It's very dangerous. Oh boy. Okay, let's continue talking about this important subject matter. Maybe I should just use this voice the whole time. Robert, may we please speak to Leninist Alex Jones? I did a good Dengist Alex Jones the other day. That was a lot of fun.
U.S.
Best way to
national
build a user
security.
base.
Of
I
course,
agree.
they've used that all the time.
I agree with
Now,
that.
as Seymour Hersh pointed out in his other accompanying article, the U.S. government has a long history of claiming that his factual stories are false, including when he exposed U.S. war crimes in Vietnam, when he exposed U.S. torture in Iraq, and of course, now they're saying the same thing. So if the U.S. government lies to you again and again and again and again, when are you going to learn? Especially considering that Seymour Hersh has a track record of being correct again and again and again. So let's continue going through the main points of the story here. He notes that the main figures involved in overseeing this sabotage operation were Joe Biden, the U.S. president, his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, and the Undersecretary
Hersh's
of State
wiki
for
page
Political
was edited
Affairs,
57
Victoria
times yesterday.
Nuland,
Yeah.
all of whom have a very hardline neoconservative
Conspiracy
foreign policy.
theorist,
Victoria Nuland
genocide
herself
apologist
was a key
Seymour
figure
Hersh,
involved in the
disgraced
2014
journalist.
coup in Ukraine that overthrew Ukraine's democratically elected government that had been Jew
Right, is
politically
that how that
neutral
works?
and installed a Western puppet regime. And there's a photo here of the three of them, the main figures from the State Department and the White House. And on the left, you can see Victoria Nuland. She is the wife of the notorious neoconservative godfather, Robert Kagan. And there's this infamous phone recording of her speaking with the U.S. ambassador, Jeffrey Piot, in Ukraine in 2014.
Oh, don't worry, it wasn't
just
a coup,
few
though.
weeks before the U.S.-backed coup in February. And she and the U.S. ambassador are naming the people who are going to run the Ukrainian government after the coup. And she specifically says, Arseniy Yatsenyuk. She says Yats is the guy, referring
He's
to a
our guy.
right-wing Ukrainian politician who became prime minister of Ukraine immediately after the coup. So
And again, as I was mentioning this earlier, since we've got a new viewers and a new audience, probably mention this. We're important to mention this again. We hear about 2014 in Ukraine a lot of this Maidan protest, and how, of course, it wasn't a coup. It wasn't. That wasn't an example of American intervention. These were simply democracy and freedom-loving Ukrainians standing up for themselves. But really important to talk, because Russian gas is a central component to all of this, and how. This is something we're also going to be talking a lot about tomorrow on this show, how Ukraine in 2013, 2014 was in the process of rejecting an IMF loan and taking a better deal from Russia that included cheap Russian gas, which immediately led to this Maidan protest movement, which, of course, John McCain appeared at, and Hillary Clinton and all these people. And this is when the pro-Western, pro-NATO government was installed following that, which of course promptly took the IMF loan that the previous government had rejected. Now we're talking about the Nord Stream pipeline. Germany, also a country that was getting cheaper Russian gas. And now this conflict has allowed the U.S. to go in there and say, like, no, you're not allowed to take this gas. You must buy instead more expensive fracked gas from the United States, and are now, as we're talking about, literally sabotaged and destroyed the pipeline infrastructure, which was partly German infrastructure to get cheaper gas from Russia. And that's how brazen the United States is, even with countries that are their allies and that are subservient to them. So Russian gas is kind of one of the main factors behind a lot of these kinds of geopolitical outcomes that we've been seeing. And America kind of reestablishing its dominance over Western Europe, which is starting to trade more with China and was starting to make these kinds of deals with Russia. That was an unacceptable situation for Western imperialists. That has been animating a lot of their activity there, whether it's the Maidan, the war in Eastern Ukraine, which we've been arming and funding these proxies in Eastern Ukraine for the last 10 years before the conflict really escalated with the invasion, or when it comes to this pipeline sabotage as well.
This is someone who has a long history of being involved in U.S. coups and anti-Russia operations, so it's no surprise to hear that she was one of the main people, along with Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, in this sabotage operation. Now,
USA bullying Europe as well as Russia. Exactly. Just it's pure like American belligerence. That's the only kind of diplomacy that they know how to do. As much as they like to talk about, respecting other countries' autonomy and democracy and all this nonsense. By the way, I must give a shout out as well to brand new follower and who's sure to be a valued community member moving forward, Dr. Wankenpeen. Thank you for the follow, Dr. Wankenpeen. And again, I encourage anyone, if you want to chat or if you want to join the community, please smash the follow button. The doctor's in. The doctor is in. Our friend Dr. Wankenpeen. That's right. It is free. It's free to smash the follow button. It is absolutely free. It costs nothing. And it really helps out a lot.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you very much for the gifted sub, Fart Party 69.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Another valued community member. And thank you to Lennon Smash for the gifted sub.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
We're full of doctors and lawyers in this community. That's right. And thank you so much to our friend Comrade Social Distancing for the 2 gifted subs as well. And I would just like to say as well, for any generous viewers, if you're a supporter of this show, if you've been planning on doing any bulk gift subs recently, now would be a wonderful time. I just want to throw this out there. It would be a wonderful time while we got these new viewers, for anyone that was planning on doing some gift subs, to see if we can hook in a couple more unsuspecting viewers and bring them into our dark world of conspiracy and subversion. I would be doing myself a major disservice if I didn't make this humble request.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle. You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Thank you so much to our friend Carrier Wave.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Thank you, Carrier Wave, for the 5 gifted subs. That's 69 gifted subs from Carrier Wave. Very nice number of gifted subs. And thank you to Plunger Man as well for the 5 gifted subs. And that's right, folks. You did hear that correctly. This is Twitch's only. Let me just back up. There's a lot of different Twitch streams out there. There's a lot of communities, right? There's a lot of different folks doing all sorts of different content right here on Twitch. Well, right here on this channel is Twitch's only 2-dimensional, triangle-shaped friendship access.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system known as the Friendship Triangle. We're hearing from a number of very elite members of this community, such as Carrier Wave and Plunger Man, and as well our friend Ben Imps. And if you want to move, if you want to be part of this revolutionary community, you can subscribe to the channel, which puts you in the base level of the 2-dimensional, non-pyramid shaped triangular tiered reward system. Gifting up to 5 subs moves you up through the chaos zone into that elite tier. Of the friendship triangle system, a life-changing opportunity. Congratulations to you, actually. Our lurker friends today, our new viewers, congratulations to you. It's a huge day for you. A wonderful opportunity to join the very best community right here on Twitch.
You can count on me.
Which
You're gonna
has
have good old
contributed
Rob
to so many
talk you
people.
through all this.
Getting a lessened level of alienation.
You can count on me.
Isolation.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
In these dark and uncertain and unstable times. Ben in Palm Springs. Okay, thank you for the correction, Ben. I'll just say Ben. And thank you also to Exio Duck for the 100 friend
You can
coin.
count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I can talk without follow if I use bits, I guess technically, although it's 200 friend coin to activate the text to speech.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you to Don Dark Zoni for the 2 gifted subs as well. Very kind of you.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And thank you also to Red Wizard for the gifted sub, and Jay, thank you for the gifted sub, and thank you Dummy Dorco as well for the gifted sub.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And thank you to Don Dark Zoni for another gifted sub. My goodness.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob.
We're gonna get to our serious discussion in a moment. As a Twitch streamer, this is my job technically to do this. It's my main source of income. It would be probably not the best idea to take this moment when I've got a couple of extra viewers here to not try to make this appeal to people.
You can count on me.
So
you're gonna have good old
please
Rob
excuse
to
me.
talk you through all this.
We'll get back to our important discussion very soon. Guys, got to do a little business here. Got to do a little business. I hope you understand. Thank you, Sean, for the gifted sub, and thank you to Marty for the gifted sub to our friend Hassan.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Join the friendship triangle. It will change your life. The worm god blesses us all. Not a cult.
Yeah, and thank you, Relic, for the 11 months of Prime. And again, I just want to emphasize that all the stuff, the worm god and the cult stuff, that is all just a meme. That's all just kind of an inside joke that we do here. You know, it really isn't a cult. It's not anything dark or weird like that at all, and you don't need to worry about it. It's just something cool and good for you to do, and it's just a good community to be a part of, and that's all. That's all it is. Okay? We're just having a laugh, innit? There is also a merch sale going on as well, if you want to buy merch for this community, like what I'm wearing right now. A number of other wonderful designs, merch designs as well on the TRRS merch store. Let us talk about the pipeline, Lexi. Thank you,
You
for
can count on me.
back
You're gonna
on
have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
just a bit of banter. That's right, a hot meal. Thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you. We will get back to the pipeline in a moment, but now I'm going to be always interrupted. This is the problem. This is the dilemma. When we got this hype train situation going on, now I'm going to be interrupted.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Lexi, you tell me to get back to the pipeline. Now you're interrupting me. Which is it? Which is it? Do you want me to talk about the pipeline, or do you want to interrupt me with gift subs?
The friendship triangle saved my life. Was told to clean my room. God bless.
Thank you, though, Lexi, for the gifted sub, and thank you, Useless, for the 1,000 friend coin. Very kind of you. My goodness, what a day over here on TRRS. Are people complaining about how I said dilemma now? As usual, folks, I'm saying things correctly, and sometimes some confused people in the chat that have weird, distorted ideas of how to pronounce things kind of make fun of me. But I say things the right way. Rob pretending to be annoyed by the subs rolling in is also a cherished meme and inside joke, so keep interrupting him. No, it's not a joke. It's serious. It's really annoying and distracting when people repeatedly interrupt me.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
It's frankly kind of disrespectful when I'm trying to talk and I'm trying to have a serious discussion, and folks like Lennon Smesh, thank you, Lennon Smesh, are repeatedly interrupting me and distracting me with gifted subscriptions. It's very frustrating, and I don't like it.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And another thing that I want to talk about, and this is really important, is that when it comes to this Nord...
Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
Okay, thank you, Don Dark Zoni, for the gifted sub. Thank you, Don Dark Zoni, and thank you, I guess, to Relic. I guess, thank you for the 10 gifted subs. Yeah, it's very generous of you. It's very generous of you for the 10 gifted subs when I'm trying to make this important point. Jeez. The kind of
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
You say heterogeneous or heterogeneous? Sovereignty or sovereignty?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Don Dark Sony, for the another gifted sub. And Xeo Diuk, thank you for the 200 friend coin. I would say heterogeneous and sovereignty. Diaspora. Okay. Hegemony. Okay, no.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Now we're getting way off course here. Thank you again to Comrade Social Distancing for another gifted sub. We're actually very close to beating the previous record of subs.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob
during
to
previous
talk you
hype
through all
trades.
this.
Good time to sub?
Steve, thank you for the 14 months of tier 1. Thank you very much. Anywho, I will try to continue on with this.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I'm going to try to continue on with this serious discussion now. Now that we've had this little brief...
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Part Ian, for the gifted sub. Thank you, Part Ian, and thank you also to Don Dark Zoni for another 2 gifted subs from Don Dark Zoni. Thank you. This is now Rob's life. I literally remember like the first time when I first started doing this, and I started getting subscriptions, and I was just like, oh, okay, I see how this works, and now I just have to do this forever. Now it's just a simple matter. It's like you think you've won at life. Now it's just a simple matter of logging onto Twitch every single day and doing this, and my problems are over. Little do you know what you're signing up for in those early days. But then you get to a kind of a sunk cost fallacy where you can't stop, but you're like, I just have to keep doing this. It's really something else. It's really something else. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for contributing to the channel. I do really appreciate it. And once again, one final plea to our lurkers and new viewers today. Please hit the follow button. Please join the community.
Rob to talk you through all this.
TRRS Sankara, TRRS Sankara.
And you know what? Also join the Discord server. This is the best Discord server of any community. Not only is this the best Twitch community, this community also lives on Discord when the stream is not live. Please join that as well. Smash the follow button. Join the Discord server. Thank you again, folks. Thank you, Ben Bang Boom, for the 15 months tier 1. Let's now continue. Finalement, on va continuer avec notre vidéo. This has gone on long enough. This nonsense has gone on long enough. We will now be continuing the video. Here we go.
Seymour Hirsch pointed out that Nord Stream was
just about the Discord though as well. Like Lodane's saying, most Discords suck. I know you're joined 30 Discords and you don't ever use them. I understand that. I feel the same way. This Discord does not suck. It is really cool. There's lots of cool activities, movie nights, reading groups, theory, if you're into this socialism stuff, food pics, pets, all kinds of great shit going on in there. Please join that. Here's the video.
Was always seen by Washington and its anti-Russian NATO partners as a threat to Western dominance. I'm going to come back to this later. I'm going to go through the main points of his article first, but he doesn't talk a lot about the economics of this. I'm going to talk more about the economic implications after I summarize the main points. But let's continue going on in this article. So he notes that the planning to sabotage the Nord Stream pipelines began in December 2021. That is to say, more than 2 months before Russia invaded Ukraine. So the U.S. cannot use this as an excuse saying that they sabotaged Nord Stream in response to Russia invading Ukraine. They were already planning on doing it, and that gave them a good excuse to do so. I should mention that in September of 2021, Nord Stream ended construction, and the German government did not give the certification needed to open the pipeline. So that explains why this meeting was organized in December, just 2 months after the pipeline was completed and 2 months before Russia invaded Ukraine. So in this meeting, it was organized by Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, and it brought together the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's the leaders of the military, along with the CIA, the State Department, and the Treasury Department. They discussed multiple possibilities, including sanctions, and they also discussed kinetic actions. That's another fancy way of saying attacks. Kinetic action is this euphemism used by the U.S. military to refer to attacks. So Seymour Hersh points out that...
You know, just a brief recommendation, I think the absolute best podcast to listen to break down the way that like language is used to obfuscate certain narratives, whether it's on a geopolitical sense or domestically, is the Citations Needed podcast. They do such great work in going over things like that, the way that language is used to hide or obfuscate the real motivations and the real stories that are happening behind these things.
Again, this is 2 months before Russia invaded Ukraine, that Jake Sullivan, following the orders of Biden, had already decided that they were going to destroy the Nord Stream pipelines. So this is before Russia invaded. They already had this plan. And all of this that Seymour Hersh is discussing is based on an anonymous source with insider knowledge of the operation. And his source told Seymour Hersh, quote, "It's an act of war." So acknowledging that the U.S. blowing up a pipeline between Russia and Germany is an act of war against Russia. I should also add it's an act of war against Germany.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
Which is ostensibly an ally of the U.S., a member of NATO.
It's their ally.
Now, the CIA director,
the destruction
William Burns,
of the Nord
he
Stream
himself
pipeline,
was former ambassador.
And this whole, this forcing Germany to get on board this sanctions regime against Russia is going to screw over average people in Germany. It's going to be absolutely hellacious for their energy prices. You know? It's not just an act of war against Russia, it's an act of war against Germany as well. But again, Germany as a country, we don't talk about this that often, is literally militarily occupied by the United States. You know? Doesn't it kind of seem like when there's a country that's completely militarily occupied by the United States, making these decisions that might be perplexing to you, considering they're sabotaging their own energy security and their own actual security? You say, why are they doing that? Well, it kind of seems like there's an American with a gun pointing it at them and being like, here's what your job is. Here's what you're going to be doing. Doesn't it kind of feel like that? And again, that's imperialism. Imperialism is not just when you invade another country, but when you can make your own allies slit their own throats economically, that's when you're an imperialist power. Yeah, Germany thought they were independent. Nope.
To Russia, and he authorized the CIA to create a working group to oversee this covert operation using deep sea divers from the U.S. Navy. And they began to create the plan. Seymour Hersh points out the CIA has a history of carrying out attacks like this and also spying on the Russian military and using pipelines and such, going back to the first Cold War in 1971. What he doesn't mention, what I would add, is that in the 1980s, the CIA did the same thing in Nicaragua, sabotaging civilian infrastructure, putting mines in Nicaragua's ports to blow up Nicaragua's ports. And the Nicaragua took the U.S. government to the International Court of Justice and won the case. And the U.S. government still owes billions of dollars of reparations to Nicaragua, but refused to pay it. So anyway, fast forwarding back to early 2022, before Russia invaded Ukraine, the CIA working group reported back to Jake Sullivan,
Yes, you're safe from the Harry Potter discourse here. Yes. Just don't play the game. That's my one stance. It's not that hard to not play a game, you know? You know, I know there's no ethical consumption under capitalism and all that, but like Harry Potter is inextricably linked to J.K. Rowling, who doesn't just someone who has expressed transphobic views, has made herself a leader in like the transphobic like movement. That's what she spends day in and day out. She's a anti-trans activist. Just don't play the game.
White House National Security Advisor saying, quote, "We have a way to blow up the pipelines."
That was all.
Before Russia invaded, they
That was
already
all.
had
That's
this
the
plan
one
worked
stance.
out. Then on February 7th, at a press conference, U.S. President Biden threatened, and he said, if Russia invades, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. I'm going to play that clip.
If Russia invades, that means
Hiko
tanks and
Komori,
troops
I'm not doing the
crossing
discourse. I'm not doing
the
it.
border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Now, in
Well, how do you
addition
get
to
this clip?
Biden's
I
threat,
know.
before that, on
I thought this
January
was an
27th,
exclusive.
2022, about a month before
Ben
Russia invaded
scooped me.
Ukraine, the third in command of the U.S. State Department, the Undersecretary of State, Victoria Nuland, made very similar threats. She said Nord
know
Stream
it's
2 will
insane.
not move forward.
Not only is the clip of Biden saying that insane, which I remember we looked at that clip when he said it. We looked at the clip the day that the pipeline was blown up, and we're looking at it today. Yeah, and that's funny because we still have to pretend that there's some mystery about what happened with the pipeline. That's the funny thing about that. Despite that clip existing of Joe Biden being like, "No, we're going to take care of it. Don't worry about it." Before they dropped him in with the frog suit to plant the charges, but we still have to be like, "What a mystery!" We have to pretend. We have to go through this whole song and dance. What are you, some kind of conspiracy theorist accusing the U.S. of sabotaging this infrastructure? What are you, some kind of tanky conspiracy theorist? It's like, no, I'm literally just looking at what the president of the United States openly said. And here's another clip, which I'm sure is going to be very revealing.
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we
January
continue to
27th.
have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
Seems pretty. This is mob boss shit. Like when we talk about America, the hegemon, America as the leader of the rules-based international order, or the West, or whatever you want to call it. It is like an international crime syndicate. And they literally talk, in this case, like mob bosses. The lovely pipeline you got there. Be a damn shame if something were to happen to that. You know? This is how they threaten other countries like this. And it's literally just mob boss shit. And that's what America is. It's the global gangster state. It's the fucking criminal gangster state. It's the mob boss at the head of the global imperialist cartel. And they see a challenge to that endless hegemony that they've enjoyed over the last couple of decades. They see that challenge emerging now. And all of these flashpoints in the new Cold War, whether it's in Ukraine or Taiwan or Syria, is all part of it. That's all the reason for it. It's not because America cares about democracy or authoritarianism or human rights or any of that stuff. That's all it is. It's the global criminal mob boss seeing their control start to slip away, seeing a rival start to emerge, and are responding to it using the only methods that they know how, which is trying to destabilize and overthrow these places. Although when it comes to China, it's far too late for America to ever do anything because of how intertwined America's and China's economy is, which was done for very specific, deliberate reasons when China opened up their economy. That's the whole Dengism argument. And Deng has kind of been proved right by a lot of what we're seeing right now, America's inability to confront this little problem of the fact that China's a central cog in the whole global economy now, and you can't just overthrow them because of this fact. But you know what I mean? This is how mob bosses talk. You know, one way or another, it's not going to continue. The Nord Stream sleeps with the fishes. That's right. Dengist Rob. This thing, I don't know if I'm a Dengist, but you just have to kind of acknowledge that he's kind of been proven right with a lot of those decisions, which were very controversial when they were made. It was very controversial in the 80s or 90s to praise Deng Xiaoping or suggest that he was like a socialist. You know, Deng Xiaoping's one of the leading neoliberals. He invented neoliberalism practically. Very controversial, but looking back on it from 2023, in retrospect, a lot of these decisions are kind of like, oh, okay, I kind of see why they were making these decisions now. That's my stance. That's my stance on Dengism. That's all.
How can you say that for sure? Where does your confidence come from on that?
As I said, we've had extensive consultations at every level with our German allies. I'm not going to get into the specifics here today, but we will work with Germany to ensure that the pipeline does not move forward.
The State Department spokesman, Ned Price, who was previously a CIA analyst, he also used the exact same comments when asked on January 26th. So again,
that is
this
what
is a
happened.
month before Russia invaded. These are top figures in the U.S. government saying very clearly that if Russia invades, they're going to destroy the Nord
Lex,
Stream
unfortunately, when you point that out, people get very upset, though. As you've probably discovered and as I've discovered. When you point this out, people are like, what? You can't say that. And they do a face called the lib face, which you'll probably see in the chat now. When you point this stuff out, that, yeah, the West, America and Canada and its allies did indeed destabilize and overthrow the government in Ukraine and installed a government that was, going to be more pro-NATO, more pro-Western. And when you point this out, and immediately afterward, like I was saying, the CIA, Canadian intelligence, British intelligence started arming and funding these right-wing militias in eastern Ukraine to fight this war in eastern Ukraine immediately after we overthrew the government. And when you point that out, people go, oh, what? What? And they get very upset.
They were not being shy about it. They were saying it pretty clearly. Now, this brings us back to Seymour Hersh's report. And here he talks about another key detail, which is it was not just the U.S. government, the CIA, and the Navy that were involved in this operation. It was also a member of NATO, Norway. And this is important because Norway is often portrayed by social democrats and, some progressives who are soft on imperialism as this great democrat.
It kind of seems like your whole politics are just anti-USA. You can't just base your whole politics around being anti-American. Well, I'm here to tell you right now, folks. Yes, you can. You can do that. You can base your entire politics around being anti-American. And you know what? You're probably going to be right 85% of the time or up. And I would take the over on any geopolitical event if you just form your analysis based on hating America. You're probably going to be proven correct the vast majority of the time. Yes, you can. I'm telling you, you can do that. I believe in you. This is an anti-American stream, and I thank Twitch for promoting it today. That's the marketplace of ideas in action. That's a big win for the marketplace of ideas.
Democratic socialist paradise. But the reality is that Norway is part and parcel of the imperialist system. Norway is part of NATO and has been involved in numerous wars of aggression. For instance, back in 2011, when NATO destroyed the Libyan state and killed the leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, the U.S. Defense Secretary, Robert Gates, he praised both Norway and Denmark for helping to destroy Libya. And he pointed out that these Scandinavian so-called socialist democracies or whatever, which are not socialist and they're not democracies either, they helped the U.S. and France and Britain bomb 1/3 of targets with 12% of the NATO planes in this colonialist war.
Here's the video to
Libya.
The clip, the link to Ben's video. I really encourage
so
everyone
it's important
to follow Ben
to
Norton,
understand Seymour Hersh's reporting
his
here
presence on
about how
YouTube as
NATO
well,
is basically an
while we're
extension
watching
of
this
U.S.
content.
imperialism. And he points out that the U.S. military has vastly expanded its presence inside Norway, and Norway has a huge radar, very advanced radar technology.
That's right, Matt.
That the U.S. uses to spy deep into Russia. So again, NATO is...
That quote from Kwame Ture, Matt, has been my guiding principle throughout this whole... It's not always been easy to maintain this line throughout this conflict. That's always been my guiding principle when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, when it comes to Syria, when it comes to Hong Kong, Taiwan, whatever, Xinjiang. That's always my guiding principle. If I'm the Imam of Mecca and the USA is going to war against Satan, I'm on the side of the devil. It's never steered me wrong. Kwame Ture.
Part of the imperialist system. And he notes that the U.S. military has basically been violating Norway's sovereignty. In 2022, Norway passed a law called the Supplementary Defense Cooperation Agreement, SDCA, which basically makes the U.S. legal system have control over parts of northern Norway, so U.S. soldiers cannot be prosecuted by the Norwegian authorities. So this is basically the U.S. taking control of parts of Norway, basically colonizing parts of Norway.
And again, that's
And Seymour
imperialism.
Hersh points out that Norway was one of the original signatories of the NATO treaty in 1949 in the early days of the Cold War. I should point out that another founding member of NATO in that year was Portugal's fascist dictatorship, which had been supportive of Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. So
No
NATO has
history of
always
fascism in
been allied
Norway,
with
though,
fascists.
thankfully.
And
I'm sure.
the
I
supreme
haven't checked
commander
into
of
that,
NATO
but
today
I'm
is
sure it's fine
Jens
now.
Stoltenberg. And Jens Stoltenberg is a hardline committed anti-communist and neoconservative, and he has cooperated with the U.S. intelligence community since the Vietnam War. And Seymour Hersh's insider source told him that the commander of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, quote, is the glove that fits the American hand. So Norway played a key role in helping the U.S. in this. And he points out that that Norway had an economic interest because Norway has since become the largest supplier of energy to Europe. I'll come back to that point in a second because I want to talk more about the economic implications of this. So Seymour Hersh points out that the Norwegian Navy was involved in finding the spot off of Denmark's Bornholm Island, and that's where they sabotaged the Nord Stream pipeline. So Norway.
Interesting stuff from Comrade Social Distancing as well, saying we're getting the first American bases on Danish soil, and we too have been warned that American personnel is above Danish law and order and can basically murder people here, and our authorities can't prosecute them. There's that interesting story right now in Japan where there's an American military service officer or serviceman, I don't know the fucking terminology, but who killed someone in an auto accident and is being like imprisoned in Japan and charged with manslaughter, and America's freaking out over it. Because of course they're used to this idea of having, especially members of their military or their diplomatic corps, have basically crime be totally legal for them in these places. You know, this is why people in Okinawa and other places in Japan and in South Korea and other places where the United States military is stationed want the United States to get the fuck out of their country because they engage in this kind of activity. And there's this interesting case right now where American politicians are starting to freak out the fact that there's an American soldier being actually punished for committing a crime in Japan. Because they're used to just be able to do that with total impunity.
Played a key role in helping the CIA and the U.S. military. And as Seymour Hersh puts it, the Norwegians were key. And this was all done under the cover of NATO military exercises in the Baltic Sea in June. They're held every year, and they're called Baltic Operations 22 or Baltops 22. The Norwegians proposed this would be the ideal cover to plant mines, and they did so again off the coast of Bornholm Island. And at the time, there were NATO teams of divers that were planting mines and then using technology to find and destroy them, and they used that as an excuse to blow up the Nord Stream pipelines. Back in October, I wrote a report about this titled "Who Sabotaged Nord Stream Pipelines?" US
yeah, Natasha,
it
was just MLK Day a few days ago. We talked about it on the stream. We listened to MLK's speech, why I'm against the Vietnam War. And very interesting, MLK, how when he started to, as I pointed out at the time.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
When he started to focus his kind of commentary, not just on social justice in the United States, but on connecting the struggle of black people in the United States with the anti-imperialist struggle throughout the world, that's when he became like a real danger to the establishment, and when he was assassinated, you know, when he started making these kinds of connections. And thank you, Riskinverse, for gifting a sub to Natasha. Thank you, Riskinverse.
I knew. And in this article that I wrote, I pointed out that these NATO military exercises were happening. And this was also pointed out by a researcher on Twitter that I've collaborated with, who's very good. Unfortunately, Elon Musk's Twitter has censored his account for posting information about Ukraine that Elon Musk's U.S. government sponsors. Elon Musk is, of course, a U.S. government contractor and has gotten billions of dollars of subsidies from the U.S. government. They have censored the account of this guy, Bidet Marksman, for reporting information that they deemed so-called Russian disinformation. But I pointed out in this article back in October that every year NATO organizes military exercises in the Baltic Sea in which the U.S.-led military alliance uses drones to clear sea mines. The 2022 exercises were held in June. So, I mean, this was pretty obvious at the time that NATO was being used as cover. And I pointed out in this article, after working with this investigator at Bidet Marksman on Twitter, that the U.S. Navy conducted military exercises near the Danish island of Bornholm, and the U.S. and British armed forces were training Ukraine's military to hunt for mines with underwater
We're happy
drones.
to, Natasha.
So
thank you for joining us.
There were a lot of
Thank you for
pieces
joining
of
the
evidence
community.
hinting toward this. But of course, Seymour Hersh always delivers the goods. He's the one who has tons of sources inside the U.S. government,
And again,
they're
folks,
the ones who have
smash
officially
the follow
confirmed this
button.
now.
Okay, smash the follow button if you enjoy this kind of content and you want to support the channel, totally free of charge. Make sure you join the community, follow, get an alert when I go live. And if you think this kind of content is good, send a message to Twitch that it's actually good to promote this kind of content. Because unfortunately on Twitch, the kind of viewpoint that we kind of try to articulate here in this program, I don't think gets the amount of attention than other more reactionary viewpoints when it comes to foreign policy or these debate weirdos, these types, you know? I think if you want to show Twitch this kind of content can be, popular on the platform, that's actually like useful. Smash the follow button. It's very helpful.
Which many people suspected at the time. So we're almost done with Seymour Hersh's article, and then I'll talk about the economic implications. So after the bombs, the explosives, which are C4 explosives, were put on the Nord Stream pipelines in June during the NATO military
debate the
exercise
fascism
in
away.
2022.
That
The
is
White
not
House
how that
decided
works,
they wanted
in fact.
to delay the explosion because obviously
Never debate.
they knew that if they exploded...
I'll promise you one thing, okay? If you're a new viewer, if you're a new community member, I will never debate. This is one of my main philosophical tenets, which we try to express here on this show. Never debate. So if you don't enjoy that kind of content, don't worry. You will unless it's about Avatar, of course. Unless it's about Avatar: The Way of Water, or anything else in the Avatar franchise. Sometimes I do get a little debatey about that. Otherwise, though, never debate. You won't catch me. You will not catch me debating anyone. I will not be engaging in the blood sport. I know it's good for growing your channel and your community and all that stuff. I will not be engaging in any debates with anybody. You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this and not debate.
If they blew up the pipelines immediately...
If you mention the aim, we won't get through the pipeline. That's true.
Right after the NATO military exercises, it would be very obvious who did it. So they ended up waiting, and then in September, Norway blew up the pipelines. Well, following U.S. orders, of course. And Seymour Hersh points out that the CIA has a history of carrying out operations not only abroad, but inside the United States. The CIA has a history of spying on anti-war leaders. The CIA has a history of spying on U.S. citizens, being involved in the assassination of foreign leaders and overthrowing foreign governments like the socialist Chilean president Salvador Allende. And he points out that the former CIA director, Richard Helms...
What is this?
He said that basically if the U.S. president wants to do something,
outrageous.
then they can do it. Laws don't matter. He said, the CIA director, Richard Helms, said, quote, "You almost have an immaculate conception when you do something under orders from the president." And he said, quote, "Whether it's right that you should have it or wrong that you should have it, the CIA works under different rules and ground rules than any other part of the government." Now, I would also add that the CIA has also been involved in assassinating presidents like JFK. But anyway,
did you ever think about that?
Continuing here, on September 26th, 2022, the Norwegian Navy dropped a sonar buoy which set off the C4 explosives on the Nord Stream pipelines and blew them up. And of course, Norway was following U.S. orders in doing so. Now, Seymour Hersh points out that after there was a propaganda campaign in the U.S. media creating this ridiculous conspiracy theory, trying to blame Russia for blowing up its own pipelines that Russia and other European companies invested billions of dollars in and spent years building. And Russia, by the way, after the pipelines were destroyed, Russia was doing research to see how much it would cost to rebuild them. So why would Russia destroy its own pipelines? It makes no sense. But Seymour Hersh points out that this conspiracy theory spread by the U.S. media was spurred on by calculated leaks from the White House. That is to say, the White House, the U.S. government, was playing the media like a mighty Wolitzer. To quote a former CIA official, a senior CIA official who famously said that the CIA plays the media like a mighty Wolitzer, which is a musical instrument. So the CIA basically controls the media. And this is an example of the White House using the media to spread disinformation and a conspiracy theory to try to blame Russia for the pipeline that the U.S. blew up. And finally, Seymour Hersh concluded his article noting that at a Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing, the third in command of the U.S. State Department, the neoconservative operative, Victoria Nuland. She was speaking with Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who's also a hardline neoconservative like her. And Ted Cruz was helping to lead the congressional opposition against
Literal
Nord
wag
Stream,
the dog.
pressuring
This
for
is the
more and more
annoying
hawkish
thing, though, up the
positions
reds, like I
against
was
Russia.
saying earlier, like when it comes to all this stuff, you see we all know that the role the media plays in upholding Western imperialism, and yet still people get fooled by this shit, or you get called a conspiracy theorist when you point out the role that the media is playing in manufacturing consent for any of these things, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or Taiwan, or the Uyghur stuff, or whatever. And you see the role that the media plays in that. And when you point out the fucking obvious fact about this, that it's a propaganda arm of the U.S. government, even though there's this kind of like plausible deniability because of the private media system, which is just completely fake. And again, you get talked about like you're a conspiracy theorist for pointing this shit out. It's really mind-boggling to me.
Russia. And the third in command of the U.S. State Department, Victoria Nuland, she boasted, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say,
Hang on, I'm just getting a soda
at the bottom of the sea. Here is that clip.
As you know, in January of last year, the Senate voted on my legislation to impose sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And it did so before Russia had invaded Ukraine. When the Senate voted on those sanctions, President Zelensky publicly urged, even begged, the United States Senate to pass those sanctions. And President Zelensky said, passing those sanctions then were the last chance to prevent Russia from invading Ukraine, the last chance to prevent Russian tanks rolling into Ukraine. Was President Zelensky wrong?
Senator Cruz, like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea.
So those were the main details of this blockbuster report by the GOAT, as they say, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Seymour Hersh, the best journalist in the world. And that is his latest report. And you can find that over at his Substack, which is seymourhersh.substack.com. I will, of course, link to that in the description below. But before I conclude today, I want to talk about the economic implications about this and a few other pieces of evidence that we had.
Is it still a Cold War? This is an interesting question because I started off asking this question. Atomic Elbow, new community member. Is it still a Cold War when there's an actual war in Ukraine? And I would say yes, because we're talking about, similar to how in the previous Cold War, for many millions of people around the world, it wasn't cold at all. For people in Nicaragua and El Salvador who were victims of these exact similar situations of the U.S. arming and funding these proxies or Contras who engaged in all kinds of barbaric attacks against them in these civil wars there. For people in Korea and Vietnam, right? These were hot fronts in this overall geopolitical conflict. So I think Ukraine is a front in the Cold War that has heated up, that's turned into an actual conflict, but it's overall still part of that same kind of larger geopolitical situation, right? It's just one front. Yeah, Indonesia is another perfect example. 1 to 3 million killed there. For many millions of people in the global south, the Cold War was not cold in any way. Pretty hard to believe anything this guy says when he says things like Denmark isn't a democracy. Well, where do you live, Hyperco? I live in Canada, and I don't think Canada is a democracy either, nor is the United States. Maybe that's a question for a larger question, though, so I want to get through this. This guy sounds based, but I only just joined. Are you talking about me or are you talking about Ben? I hope it's both of us.
That made it very obvious from the beginning that this was the U.S. government. Now, I noted in my original report back in October, and I'll link to that in the description below, that the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken boasted right after the attacks on Nord Stream.
Thank you for joining us.
He said that it was a tremendous...
And again, I'm starting to keep hitting this. We got some new viewers today because Twitch is respecting my grind. So please, thank you for joining the community, Thumbopolis. For other lurkers, other new viewers, if you're new to the community, please hit the follow button, join the community, and join the Discord server. Is this a leftism vibe I'm getting? Yeah, I would say you're correct in that vibe. Yeah, I would say that that's part of the vibe, definitely. Just going to keep periodically reminding people while we're here. Follow, join the Discord. If you enjoy this kind of content, I'm on here on Twitch every single day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, starting at noon Eastern time. That is 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. So join the community, join the Discord if you want to get alerts, and if you want to continue supporting this content and watching the show.
This opportunity to
Thank you,
once
Lana.
and for all remove
One day
the
Twitch will
dependence on
recognize your
Russian
grind
energy.
as well,
And he
Lana.
boasted that the U.S. was boosting its exports of
Thumb up,
liquefied
we got
natural
some
gas,
very good
LNG,
emotes
to
here.
Europe. So the U.S. was profiting from this. Here is that video clip.
Ultimately, this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs.
You
That's
can
very
count on me.
significant,
You're going to have
and
good
that
old
offers
Rob to
tremendous,
talk you through all this.
Strategic
Thank you so much, John, for the gifted sub. Thank you, John.
opportunity for.
But
for
don't
the
worry
years to
about
come.
that, Thumbopolis.
We've significantly increased our production, as well as making available to Europe liquefied natural gas, and we're now the leading supplier of LNG to Europe to help compensate for any gas.
And this, excuse me, this clip from Blinken, we're talking about all this shit about, U.S., the way that they're engaging with the world, with Germany, and getting Western Europe off of Russian gas and putting them onto fracked gas from the United States at a significantly higher price. And you'll say, what, are you some kind of conspiracy theorist? You think these kind of economic issues have some kind of impact in the United States arming Ukraine? They're just doing that because they care about human rights. You must be a conspiracy theorist to claim that it has anything to do with, getting Western Europe onto American gas. But they literally just say it. This is the annoying thing. You got Biden saying, yeah, we're going to get rid of the pipeline. You got Newland saying, yeah, don't worry, we're going to get rid of the pipeline. You have Anthony Blinken saying, thank goodness we're getting people onto American gas and off of Russian gas. They literally just say it. They come right out and say it. It's not a conspiracy theory. They openly admit it. That's the amazing thing.
Clip.
Ultimately, this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to once and for all remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs.
His imperial designs, and that's the amazing thing, right? There's always an aggressor in these things. Like when it comes to the Chinese balloon or whatever, China's being so aggressive. They're being so aggressive in the South China Sea when China's militarily encircled by American military bases, and they freak out about a balloon like it's the worst thing that ever happened. Or Russia's being so aggressive despite, the history of overthrowing the Soviet Union and the absolute plunder and pillage that took place in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union, which decimated millions of people's lives. The expansion of NATO right up to the borders of Russia, overthrowing the Ukrainian government and installing this pro-NATO, pro-Western government, arming proxies in Eastern Ukraine to fight the civil war. But then we talk about their aggressiveness when they respond to this kind of stuff. And that's the thing. It's it's only the others. It's only the others that engage in this kind of thing, this aggressiveness, or this weaponization of energy. You have Blinken literally admitting America's primary motivation for making a lot of these decisions. And it talks about Putin and Russia weaponizing energy. That's literally what America does all over the world. And they never acknowledge their own role in provoking these situations, or they never acknowledge their own role in promoting their industries and their multinationals. It's always the bad guys that are ones being aggressive, that are the ones, engaging in this kind of debt trap diplomacy, as we see with China and Russia, or in Africa in the Belt and Road Initiative. Or the stuff with Russia offering cheaper Russian gas to people. It's weaponized energy. It's debt trap diplomacy. But America's role, the role of imperialism, the role of the IMF, and all these other things, always obfuscated, always are never discussed.
That's very significant, and that offers tremendous strategic opportunity for the years to come. We've significant.
Right, he's simultaneously he's talking about how Russia weaponizes energy, and then he's talking about this war, which is a disaster, this disastrous war, as this wonderful opportunity for American investments. In the same sentence, he talks about these things. And again, if you point that out, you get called pro-Russian or whatever. Well, even when it's just It's just observing what these people say, what they openly admit.
Increased our production, as well as making available to Europe liquefied natural gas. And we're now the leading supplier of LNG to Europe to help compensate for any gas or oil that it's losing as a result of Russia's aggression against Ukraine.
Antony Blinken made those comments in a press conference with Canada's Foreign Minister, Mélanie Joly, and she also boasted that Canada has been increasing its gas production.
Blinken seems like a true believer, like he really thinks the U.S. empire is a positive force. I actually think that's true for a lot of these U.S. officials. Like Drew, behind me, you can see the book, maybe The Jakarta Method, right there by Vincent Bevins, which is, I think, a really important read to understand the kind of history of American imperialism, focusing on Indonesia, which I don't think we talked about enough before that book was released. I don't think enough people knew, me included, about the absolute tragedy and the horrors that were unleashed in Indonesia as a result of American imperialism. But even going back to these like old CIA guys, like going back to like Guatemala and Iran and some of these first, like in the post-war period, or Korea or wherever else, you go into their, like as Bevins does and other journalists have done, you go into their personal diaries and interview members of their families and things like that. And these people weren't, even though the things they did were absolutely barbaric and evil, they weren't these like mustache twirling villains going, we're going to overthrow these countries and install U.S. friendly dictators to make good deals for our multinational corporations, even though that was the result of what they were doing. And even though millions of people were dying in the process, but they genuinely did believe that there was this like communist threat and that the United States needed to engage in this kind of violence in an effort to secure this future for everybody, for freedom and prosperity. Like they really did believe this. Like it's a brainwashed ruling class. It's a brainwashed nation as well. But these people, despite how we can talk about how evil the things that they did, but a lot of these people genuinely believed that these things were like necessary and they were part of some like grand project of, creating this global peaceful vision of the United States led hegemony. But incredibly fucking evil people, monsters, and fascists.
And exporting gas, LNG, to the U.S., which is then sent to Europe. So Canada is also profiting from the proxy war against Russia on the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines.
Yes, we are.
Now, I also pointed
Canada's
out
deeply
back in
involved
October
in it.
that Germany's foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, had likewise threatened the Nord Stream pipelines. And this was 1 week before Russia invaded Ukraine. And she said all options are on the table, including Nord Stream 2. And she said, we as Germany are prepared to pay a high economic price. So she's willing to sacrifice the people of Germany for this imperialist proxy war against Russia. Here's that very revealing video clip.
We are determined with a view to the actions and measures that we're preparing in the event of Russia acting against the Ukraine. These sanctions are or would be unprecedented and have been coordinated with all our partners and have been prepared with them. We in Germany are ready to pay a high price for that in economic terms. That is why
And again, they're saying it right away. And you know who else said something openly right away? It was Merkel the other day. I don't know if Ben's going to cover this. I hope he does. I'm sure he probably will. Merkel the other day talked about openly about how the whole Minsk agreement, that was trying to end the conflict before it turned into an invasion, which Russia was like very interested in doing through these Minsk agreements. And Merkel openly talked about the other day. If Ben doesn't show it, we can find it ourselves. Openly talked about how that was literally just to buy time. They never intended to follow through on any of the agreements they were making in Minsk. They immediately, following the Minsk agreements, continued to arm and fund these right-wing militias in Ukraine. They continued doing all these things. And Merkel openly admits that they had never had any intention of following through on any of that. And that it was purely just to buy time so they can continue to beef up Ukrainians' military through these endless arms transfers, so that when this invasion was officially provoked, which was always their strategy from moment one, to turn Ukraine into this kind of like quagmire for Russia. That was always the goal here. And the whole Minsk agreements were just literally a way for them to buy time until Ukraine was really ready to turn that into a protracted struggle, rather than just something that would be easily rolled through on day one. and people talk about like, why is, this, what they always say about the invasion of Ukraine, the illegal unprovoked invasion, right? They always say it's unprovoked, the unprovoked invasion, which as Chomsky points it out, if it wasn't provoked, they wouldn't feel the need to say that. But there's been a war happening for 10 years. What is it? 14,000 people have died in this war.
Member of the Friendship Triangle.
14,000 people or something have died in this war. We've been supporting this war. We've been arming these proxies and training them and funding them. Russia has been trying to negotiate. They've been trying to make a peace deal so that it can stop, so they didn't have to invade. We've not, as Merkel admits, we were not interested in that whatsoever. Destro09, thank you, Destro. Look at that, very brand new community member. I think. First 5 gifted subs, you rocket right up to the top, the elite tier of that friendship triangle. Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle shaped trickle-down clout and friendship access tiered reward system. Thank you, Destro, and congratulations to you.
All options are on the table. Also Nord Stream 2.
Again, those comments were made 1 week before Russia invaded Ukraine. And by the way, since then, Annalena Baerbock has said that Germany is at war with Russia. She's made it clear that the European Union is at war with Russia. Now, I also pointed out that back in 2020, the former CIA director turned Secretary of State Mike Pompeo under Donald Trump, he also said that the U.S. government would, quote, do everything we can to stop Nord Stream 2. And he said that it was dangerous and a threat, and he boasted that the...
Lexi, it's absolutely disgusting, the footage that has come out from what has been happening to Russian-speaking Ukrainians. Or anyone that's deemed to be like a collaborator. And of course, this footage gets like shared in the West and people like congratulate themselves for it. It's really fucking disturbing. It's also totally inaccurate when we hear in our media to talk about the role that the media plays in manufacturing consent for these kind of conflicts. We hear first of all, we hear all of Ukraine is united in this, and we hear all the world stands behind Ukraine. And that's not really true. A certain section of Ukrainians are united on this, and all the people in Ukraine that don't want anything to do with the West, that want to have relations with Russia, that are ethnic Russians themselves, they're just called, they're immediately dismissed as proxies, as Russian collaborators. They're literally beaten and tortured if they're in Ukraine, in one of these places, and this gets completely fucking ignored. It's really disturbing, to say nothing of in a broader context, the way that we talk about the whole world standing with Ukraine, when really what that means is the West, the former colonial countries, the rules-based international order, that's who stands with Ukraine, and the rest of the global South is either indifferent, or not indifferent, but independent, or are lean more pro-Russia because they understand fully this long history of Western imperialism and proxy wars, because all these countries in the global South have experienced that. So another way that the media kind of uses these language to manipulate and make us, not ask important questions about what we're supporting here and who we're supporting.
Trump administration was the toughest administration ever on Russia. So once again, threatening the Nord Stream pipelines back in 2020, over 2 years before Russia invaded Ukraine. Here's that video clip of Mike Pompeo.
Further on Russia, 2 weeks ago, the State Department removed Nord Stream 2's exemption under CATSA. And in December, the administration...
You see how it's totally bipartisan, too.
An important bipartisan endeavor effectively halted construction of the pipeline.
We don't think Americans and Democrats and Republicans can get along. Look at that. They get along. You get Biden talking about it. You get the Blinken. You get Mike Pompeo, the former head of the CIA. It was, extreme reactionary Republican. You don't think they can work across the aisle, reach across the aisle? They can work together sometimes on a few things, right? We got to recognize that.
We're the toughest administration ever on Russia.
Could you talk about the administration's commitment to opposing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and applying sanctions against those companies aiding in the completion of this Russian trap?
The irony is that this administration is accused by some of not being tough on Russia. I mean, President Trump personally took on this. He saw that this was a threat, that this pipeline being threat created enormous leverage for Russia, not only against Germany and broader Europe, but Ukraine as well. And so we set about it with good support on Capitol Hill, and we got legislation that was appropriate to now have delayed this project significantly. We need further tools. We're prepared to use those tools should you provide them to us. And we've also used our diplomatic capabilities to make clear to countries that we're going to do the other end too. Right? We're going to make sure that American LNG can be sold into these countries. We think Nord Stream 2 is dangerous in that respect. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that that pipeline doesn't threaten Europe.
Now, there was even more evidence at the time. Back in September, one day after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, Germany's
they mostly get along, but they just bicker about who should be in charge of running the empire. That's right. You have the two. That's all the bullshit that I was talking about in that tweet the other day about, real democracy. The people that kind of fetishize this very specific version of democracy, Western style liberal democracy, and they kind of fetishize this, and they talk about it's the only system, the only possible system you can have if you want to claim to be a democracy. And anyone that tries anything different is automatically, authoritarian or what have you. It's the same thing, but it's just in America, it's just two wings, or in Canada or whatever, it's multiple parties. In America, though, it's just two wings of the capitalist class, like that have certain debates about like, we should be more socially liberal here. We want to be more reactionary here in these social issues or whatever, but with unified, like widespread agreement in like what these goals should be, maybe a few little differences about how you go about them. But that's it, And then people in our countries fetishize this system and claim that it's the only possible democratic system when it's literally a dictatorship, as fucking Marx outlines very clearly. It's a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. It's not a democracy. This is why you got to read Marx.
CIA had warned German intelligence just a few weeks before the sabotage that gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea might be attacked. So clearly, this was the CIA which was involved in the operation to destroy the Nord Stream pipelines, according to Seymour Hersh. This was the CIA warning Germany a few weeks before that they were going to blow up the pipelines. So, I mean, it's as blatant as it could possibly get. This is mainstream German media reporting this. Then there was another article just 2 weeks after the attack in October, also published by Reuters, titled U.S. Navy jet flew across Baltic hours after Nord Stream burst. I mean, again, it's like the U.S. was just gloating. It notes that a U.S. Navy reconnaissance aircraft flew near the site of the ruptured Nord Stream 2 pipeline in the Baltic Sea hours after the first damage emerged. So, yet another example of so much evidence at the time pointing toward the U.S. government being behind this attack on the Nord Stream pipelines. Now, I noted in my report, and again, I'll link to that in the description below, that one day after Nord Stream was sabotaged, a top European politician who was formerly the foreign minister and the defense minister of Poland, which is a member of both NATO and the EU. His name is Radek Sikorski. He thanked the United States for blowing up the
still being
pipelines.
normal. That's
and
nice,
Radek Sikorski is a hardline neoconservative. He's married to the notorious U.S. neoconservative figure Anne Applebaum, and he is viciously anti-Russian and very pro-U.S. And he tweeted, quote, "Thank you, USA," and posted a photo of the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, by the way, leaking out huge sums of environmentally destructive gas, which is extremely bad for the environment and fuels climate change. So it shows how little these Western politicians actually do care about climate change. They'll claim to care about it, they'll do lip service about it when they can attack Russia or China or Venezuela, but they don't care about climate change. They want...
No, and again, like to go back to the pipeline and to contribute to what Ben's saying here, like the getting fracked gas from America to Western Europe, Germany, or wherever else is a significantly more environmentally damaging process, not only in the fracking, but then in putting the energy to transport the liquefied fracked gas to Western Europe, in significantly more environmentally damaging than simply piping natural gas from Russia to Germany. And these are the same people that lecture the global south about emissions and claiming that they support climate legislation or claiming that they're doing anything to fight climate change. Not only is that more damaging, but of course, as we know, the U.S. military is the number one emitter of carbon as well. So, and Joe Biden just gave them they gave them more money than they're fucking asking for.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Hi, Rob.
To show how much they actually care about climate change. Hello, Progressive Canuck. Thanks for the 18 months, Tier 1. Thank you very much, Progressive Canuck. And once again, just to say hello to our lurkers, I am Rob Rousseau. I'm a socialist Twitch streamer here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. The show is TRRS. It airs every single day, Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. If you enjoy the content, please hit the follow button or the subscribe button if you want. We're doing well in the subs today, but it's not like a hard limit. It's more of just like a sort of a gesture.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
It's more of just a guideline. Thank you, Hey Antonia, for the 14 months tier 1. Thank you. So just periodic reminder, okay? Periodic reminder to introduce myself and the community to all our lurker friends and all the G-men. All our friends from the CIA and the NSA and CSIS and MI6, Mossad, what have you. Happy to have you all as well. Maybe some of you should rethink some of your ideology. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to change and go in a different path and do something constructive with your life rather than destructive and reactionary. This is your opportunity, okay? And you can DM me about certain things that we could maybe talk about what you could do. Okay.
They just want Western corporations to profit from climate change, not other countries. Of course, after he tweeted that, he ended up deleting the tweet, but it was a blatant example that everyone in the world knew that it was the US government behind the destruction of these pipelines.
Yes, we did.
But now this brings me to one of the most important details in this case, and this is the economic implications that Seymour Hersh didn't get into. And that is that NATO members like Norway and the US have been profiting from the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines. It's not just geopolitical, it's also economic, as is always the case, because geopolitics and economics are inextricably linked. And that is that just hours after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, Norway and Poland opened a new pipeline called the Baltic Pipe, which connects Norway, Denmark, and Poland, which are all NATO members. And by the way, that pipeline was funded by the European Union. And the explicit goal of the Baltic Pipe was to end Europe's dependence on Russian energy. That was the explicitly stated goal that members of the Norwegian, Danish, and Polish governments and the EU all said when they opened the Baltic Pipe hours after the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines. This is a map showing the Baltic pipeline, and you can see that it is a direct competitor to the Nord Stream pipelines. So now, who is profiting from this? Norway. In 2022, Russia was the largest exporter of gas to Europe, but that they were quickly replaced by Norway. Norway has now become the largest supplier of pipeline gas to Europe. And by the way, the largest supplier of liquefied natural gas is the United States. The US is also profiting. This is an incredible graph showing in 2021, Russia provided the vast majority of gas to Germany. But now, Russia is no longer the largest provider of gas to Germany. In fact, Norway is. In 2021, Norway only provided under 20% of Germany's
That is a crazy
gas
graph.
As of 2022,
Wow.
Norway is providing at least 33% of Germany's natural gas supply, and that figure is
Norway,
increasing.
man.
And of course, it is also US corporations who are profiting from the destruction of Nord Stream and the end of Germany's and Russia's energy alliance. And I have a separate report about this in a video. I will link to that in the description below. And it's about how in 2022, the U.S. became the world's largest exporter
the real
of
socialist. Folks, I'm not a scary, remember that? We still hear that sometimes. I'm not one of these scary socialists that supports China or talks about the Soviet Union or Stalin. No, I'm not one of these scary socialists. I'm like the real socialism, like Norway. You know? I'm not one of these freaky subversives. I would never say anything good about the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. I like real socialism, like in Norway. If you want to know my take on the weather balloon, by the way, I would just encourage you to check out my previous videos. I did a lot of coverage of the balloon because I talk a lot about China and the way that our media in the West talks about China. It's one of the main things that I kind of talk about on this platform. But also, and I would encourage anyone watching, if you enjoy this content, tomorrow I will be talking to Radio Free Amanda. Amanda, aka Radio Free Amanda, aka Twitter's cat content only. We will be talking about this balloon storyline. We'll be talking about Russia and Ukraine and how Ukraine represents true sort of debt trap diplomacy, the same thing that we like to accuse China and other countries of, and all the anti-China hysteria and stuff like that. She's really good at covering these kinds of things. Really looking forward to that. That's tomorrow, 2 p.m. So if you're checking out this channel for the first time today, please come back tomorrow. And at 2 p.m., I will be talking to Radio Free Amanda. It's going to be really, really cool. Especially if you enjoy this kind of like subject matter. That's tomorrow.
LNG, liquefied natural gas. The U.S. is now tied with Qatar. And
RIP to Dank McNasty, a non-valued community member, now banned. Goodbye, Dank McNasty. Promising username, but seemed to be kind of a little bit of a troublemaker in the old chat there. Rest in peace.
why is that? Well, it's obvious. It's because Europe has become the main customer for US LNG. There is an incredible graph in this article that I wrote here that is from the Energy Information Administration, the EIA, which is part of the US government. And it shows how US LNG exports have exploded in just 6 years. In 2016, they were basically zero. As of 2022, they were over 300 billion cubic feet. Again, only tied with Qatar. And that's because that LNG is going to Europe. This graph also from the US EIA shows how in 2020 and 2021, majority or plurality of US LNG exports went to Asia, but instead in 2022, they were replaced with Europe as the top customer. So Europe became by far the biggest importer of US LNG. And of course, US fossil fuel corporations and exporters are profiting from that, along with European importers are profiting from that. And these are all private companies. And the EIA boasted that Europe imported record amounts of LNG in 2022, including France, Britain, Spain, the Netherlands, Italy, Belgium, Portugal. So Europe is paying significantly more money for expensive US LNG rather than the cheap Russian pipeline gas. And now Norway is providing pipeline gas, but the US is profiting as well. So as always, it's not just geopolitical. There are economic interests driving this. And US fossil fuel corporations and Norwegian gas suppliers are profiting from the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines between Russia and Germany. And finally, to conclude this analysis, this brings me to a book that I often cite, which was written by one of the most influential US imperial strategists, Zbigniew Brzezinski. And it's from 1997. His book is called The Grand Chessboard, American Primacy and Its Geostrategic Imperatives.
Good job, Germany.
Was the U.S. National Security Advisor under President Jimmy Carter, and he was the main architect of the CIA proxy war against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan in the 1980s. And he famously wrote in this book, he warned in this book back in 1997 that the U.S. must be on the lookout to prevent a so-called Russo-German alliance, which would be at the detriment of Europe's transatlantic connection with America. He said that a Russo-German alliance or a Russo-French alliance could threaten U.S. unipolar hegemony over Eurasia. And he said that for the first time in ever, the U.S. dominates Eurasia. The U.S. is the first truly global power. And he said whether the U.S. prevents the emergence of a dominant and antagonistic Eurasian power remains central to America's capacity to exercise global supremacy. So,
Greg, I'm sure there's someone making that case. I'm interested in whether there's a way to interpret the recent Ohio toxic events so that we can be more scared of China. I haven't looked into it. I'm sure there's people out there diligently making that case. Perhaps it was some kind of Chinese sabotage. Perhaps that's what that's what happened. But I'm sure there's someone out there, making that case.
The U.S. destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines is part of a larger strategy. The U.S. is trying to prevent the economic integration of Russia and Germany, and by extension, Germany and China. It's about preventing Eurasian economic integration and keeping Europe economically dependent on the United States and U.S. corporations.
China
That's why the United States now
trade partner
is
for a lot of Western
Europe and destroying European industry and actually luring European companies to go over.
Like this is just this is what all of these things can be boiled down to, whether it's Taiwan or Xinjiang or Hong Kong or Tibet or Russia, Ukraine or Germany or what have you, right? You look at a map, you look at Africa, who was its top trading partner 20 years ago versus now. And you just see this shift happen of the entire world going to China. You see Western Europe, it's the same thing. That's what the new Cold War is about. It doesn't have to be that complicated. I know it becomes complex, all the different storylines and narratives that get promoted, but that's really all it is. That's all you have to ever really think about. That's why these narratives come up. That's why America engages in the world the way it does. That's why this like constant hysterical demonization campaign of China is going on in our media, which I've been covering a lot over the last 3 years I've been doing this show, and it seems to be ramping up in intensity. That's why, and again, please it's childish to believe this idea that any of the concern about China, no matter where they're talking about China, is based on like human rights or democracy versus authoritarianism or independence or sovereignty or any of the words that they use to talk about when it gets to Taiwan. We want to protect Taiwanese democracy and sovereignty. That's not what it's about. It's about militarily encircling China. It's about destabilizing them. And it's these powerful American and Western interests reacting to the fact that they got outplayed at their own game, their old game of global capitalism. Like they're losing the game that they control and that they set the rules to. And they're lashing out because they've realized that they've already lost. That's what it's about. It's not about any of these like high-minded ideas that they say that it's about, And it's very easy to understand when you break it down to those like the basic levels.
For the ocean and to relocate in the United States. It's all about preventing Europe from economically integrating with Russia and by extension China and the rest of Asia, because that is the only way for the US to maintain its control over Eurasia and by extension the world. And this brings me to the final quote today, which was cited in a very good article called "Did America Cause Europe's Energy War?" at the website unheard.com. And it notes that another well-known US imperial strategist named George Friedman, who was the former chair of the private intelligence firm Stratfor, which is very closely linked to the US intelligence agencies. And in fact, Stratfor is often referred to as the shadow CIA. And George
ask Hong Kong people or Taiwan what they want, or Tibet. Well, that's the thing. It's like we often want to ask those people what they want, but we only want to hear from a specific group of people, don't we? Like Tibet, I think, is a good example. There's been a lot of like free Tibet activity. We're going back to the 90s with these big bands and groups like the Beastie Boys, who I love. We're part of this whole like free Tibet movement. That's becoming a flashpoint again as well. You saw the UN weighing in on this. You look at like the ways that people's lives have improved drastically since transitioning from the previous system into Tibet versus China controlling Tibet. And how extremely it was like a reactionary, feudalistic slave society. Now there's all this modern infrastructure being built. Life expectancy has gone drastically up. Literacy has gone drastically up. Life for millions of people in a lot of these places have improved a lot. Hong Kong had major repressed people. I agree, it did have major repressed people as well as a Western colony for over 100 years. There was no concern for the freedom or independence of Hong Kong people when it was literally just a Western colony.
Wow. Okay, Rob. Seriously, wow.
When it was simply a Western colony for hundreds of years. Oh my goodness, Christine Doe with the very kind and very generous 10 gifted subs. Unbelievable. Thank you so much to Christine for that. Fantastic. Anyway, that was my brief point I wanted to make about that kind of argument about the people in these places. And also, when you're talking about Taiwan or Ukraine, right? And you're suggesting that Western intervention in these places has anything to do with people's autonomy or what their wishes are, or we wanted them to be independent. No one wants Taiwan or Ukraine to be independent. They want them to be Western proxies. They want them to be a subservient Western colony.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
They don't want people, they don't care about people's independence or their freedom or their democracy or whatever. They want people in Taiwan to be a compliant Western proxy where they can park their nukes and they can destabilize China through them. Iraq, no, Zach. Thank you for the 5 gifted subs as well. Thank you, Zach. I really appreciate that. Thank you. My word. Very exciting. Anyway, let's continue this. Isn't Taiwan already a subservient minion to the imperial court? Yeah, absolutely. And has been for a while. And that's why the imperialist powers are not going to allow China to exert more influence or control over Taiwan, even though, as everyone recognizes on Taiwan and in China, which is that Taiwan is part of China. Despite that, America or the West or whoever is not going to allow China to exert more influence there. And I believe their goal is to provoke China in the exact same way that they provoked Russia through Ukraine by turning Ukraine into like a Western proxy, by flooding Ukraine with arms. They're doing the exact same thing to Taiwan right now.
This is some guy,
for the
Rob
exact
Russo,
same reason,
some leftist
because
based
they want
in
to
Canada.
destabilize them.
I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hello, Majority Report Raiders. Thank you for the raid, Majority Report. Bring it on in here, Raiders. Thanks for joining us. Smash the follow button, please. Very busy day here on TRRS. Very busy day. Thank you for joining us. I hope the stream was good with the Majority Report. That's how it's pronounced, of course. That's something that I pronounced correctly. The Majority Report. Sam Sater, what a fucking nightmare. That's right. So smash the follow button. We're talking about the new Cold War. We're talking about China, Russia and Ukraine, Taiwan, Syria, and focusing especially on the Nord Stream pipeline and this story that broke yesterday about America sabotaging the Nord Stream pipeline.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to
as we talked about as well, was openly admitted to by Joe Biden and Victoria Nuland and Mike Pompeo before it happened. So it's good that we're talking about it, but I think it was pretty clear to everyone what had actually happened there. Thank you, Lexi, for the gifted sub as well. Thank you, Lexi. I appreciate that. Anyway, I started to say anywho and way, and I almost said any woo. That would have been kind of wacky. And weird. But I didn't. I didn't say that, though. Anyway, let's continue the video.
George Friedman wrote back in 2010, he said that the mere possibility that Russia might collaborate with Europe, and particularly Germany, opens up the most significant threat in the decade, a long-term threat that needs to be nipped in the bud. And we can see that the U.S. nipped that threat in the bud by destroying the Nord Stream pipelines and preventing German and Russian economic integration. And finally, in a 2015 speech, this U.S. imperial strategist, George Friedman, also pointed out that the overriding interest of the United States, for which we have fought wars for centuries, has been the relationship between Germany and Russia. And he said that if Germany and Russia unite, they are the only force that could threaten us, and we need to make sure that doesn't happen. Here is that video clip.
The primordial interest of the United States, over which...
Yeah, absolutely, like Old Dutch was saying, in this whole Russia-Ukraine conflict and this whole broader new Cold War, very much missing every day Michael Brooks and his analysis of all these events, sorely lacking in our media landscape, whether it's on Twitch or just in the general media. Michael's perspective is sorely missed. And, someone who absolutely influenced me to be doing this kind of work. So we miss Michael.
For centuries,
also the impressions
wars,
as
the First, Second Cold War, has been the relationship between Germany and Russia, because united they are the only force that could threaten us, and to make sure that that doesn't happen.
And that's the world that we're in today. The Russo-German alliance didn't happen, largely because of U.S.
You would love the balloon,
but
for
actually,
sure.
we see an even stronger alliance, which is the Chinese-Russian alliance. China being the world's largest economy, according to purchasing power parity, and growing more and more by the year. And that's why the U.S. is so desperate to wage this new Cold War and is trying to prevent Europe from integrating with China and Russia with these kinds of sabotage operations. It's all about trying to prevent the creation of a multipolar world and to maintain U.S. unipolar imperialist domination so U.S. corporations and Wall Street can continue to exploit the world, the natural resources and cheap labor of the world. It's always about making more and more corporate profits. So with that said, I'm going to conclude today. Obviously, I would highly recommend that everyone go check out Seymour Hersh's article. I will
check out the article and definitely check out Ben Norton's work on YouTube, which is it was Multipolarista. Now he's rebranded as Geopolitical Economy Report. But I'm going to give the link to the video in the chat. Please make sure. Okay, we're already all over it. All over it. But there's the link to the video specifically. So please follow him. He's been a friend of the stream. He's been on the stream before. And I think a really vital resource when it comes to these kinds of like geopolitical conversations. Does really good coverage of it. I just wanted to as well talk about when he left off kind of talking about that alliance between Russia and China and how important that is to this whole new Cold War, these geopolitical maneuverings. And as we talked about before, it's truly amazing to think about because these were two great, powerful, like rising geopolitical entities that were allies at one point. And America, to their credit, like helped destroy this partnership, and with the whole Sino-Soviet split, which was a disaster for the ability of any of these countries to go up against Western imperialism on this global level. And these two countries, these were countries that were like hated each other. In the end, towards the end of the Soviet Union and during like the Deng Xiaoping era, hated each other. And, America had basically won. That's the whole end of history. America had essentially won, right? The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union was gone. China, they thought, was like a subservient Western ally that was going to be a nice little cog in the whole global capitalist system. Or so they thought, right? America had won, but through their own belligerence, like all they really had to do, as I've talked about a number of times, is just after they literally got Russia to give up on socialism. They gave up on socialism. They gave up on the Soviet Union. And all they had to do then was incorporated them into their big special club. Russia was gladly going to be a member of that special club, including Putin. Putin was more than happy to join NATO and join the West and kind of be part of this global system. But America just couldn't quite do that, though. They had to keep provoking. They had to keep antagonizing. They had to punish, right? They couldn't let Russia join their special little club. They had to keep punishing them and humiliating them over and over and over again. And then they, like through their own belligerence, they took these two powerful entities that hated each other and were at each other's throats and pushed them back together and literally created the own situation that's now destroying their own ability to maintain their global hegemony. I think there's something kind of beautiful about that, isn't there? There's something kind of beautiful about that. It's through their own belligerence that they've initiated their own destruction. I think that's something that I kind of like take a lot of inspiration from. I think that's kind of enjoyable to think about. Yeah, exactly. That's right. Russia could never join NATO because Russia existing was the whole reason that NATO was an entity in the first place. NATO was always an anti-Russian pact.
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my goodness, Ben. My goodness gracious. Ben, thank you very much for the 5 gifted subs. Very kind of you. Goodness gracious. Thank you, Ben. What a day over here on TRRS. Some wonderful discussions. And again, I'll just remind people, too, if you like this kind of content, if you like seeing this kind of content, on the front page of Twitch, please follow the stream, smash the follow button or the subscribe button if you want. Join the Discord server so you get notifications when I go live next. TRRS airs every single day on this platform. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 12 Eastern Standard Time or 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. So follow, subscribe, join the Discord. If you enjoy this kind of content, join the community. I know there's a lot of communities on Twitch, but this is the best community on Twitch. It's the best Discord server, and it's Twitch's only two-dimensional, triangle-shaped, trickle-down clout and friendship access tiered reward system. It's the only such system that exists on this entire platform. There's also very good merch. The merch is on sale right now. We got a brand new merch drop yesterday, which I encourage people to check out also. So I guess it was a little bit, yeah, we might as well take a look at this. Thank you, Lodane. I mean, just if people are curious, just if you're curious about what the community is about, you know, and you're not convinced by the discourse and stuff, you can just take a look at this image as well. And we don't need to, we've already, you know, talked about this. We don't need to get super in depth about this image. But if you want to know what the community is about and what the friendship triangle is, this is what it is. That's all. You see the clout trickles down. That's right. And if you're a non-subscriber, that's you. That's you on the bottom there, on the outside looking in. And you don't want that. You don't want it. All right? That's all. That's all. That's what the friendship triangle is. It's nothing weird. It's nothing weird. It's okay. Even, you know what? Even if you are at the bottom, we do support our lurkers and our non-subscribers as well. We do love and respect our lurkers and non-subscribers. Just a little bit less than the people that are subscribers. That's all. Just a little bit less. It's very cool and normal. That's right. So yeah, I guess I just I had maybe more ambitious plans to watch that breakthrough news video, which I don't think I have time for today to watch. We were talking about the balloon stuff. I don't think I have time to watch that. So what I will try to do tomorrow, because I'm talking to Amanda, Radio Free Amanda at 2 p.m., I will try to watch the breakthrough news video before. So it'll be a full day of more new Cold War coverage tomorrow, focusing. We talked a lot about, you know, Nord Stream and Russia, Ukraine today, but obviously China came up a lot as well. We'll be diving right back into the balloon discourse tomorrow and talking specifically about. I'm sorry, it's triggering to hear about the balloons. I know it's very scary for all our American friends to have a balloon fly over your country like that. I know it's very terrifying. But we'll be talking to Amanda about that tomorrow and talking about just generally just this relentless anti-China hysteria that we get in our media in the West, in America and Canada, of course, as well. That's what we'll be doing tomorrow. So make sure you come back tomorrow, noon Eastern, right here, twitch.tv/Rob Rousseau. TRRS. So I got another about 15 minutes. I don't have to go. I don't have to go quite yet. I think maybe we can just we missed out on some of the chit-chat, more the lighthearted chit-chat. Can I just I can't transition to doing lighthearted chit-chat now, can I then? I can't do that. Did I miss the apple? I just actually didn't eat an apple today. I did not. Usually I like to eat apples and sometimes do apple reviews on the program. I actually don't have any apples in the fridge right now. I'm a little low stocked. I got to go grocery shopping. Maybe pick up some more of those Cosmic Crisps. We're basically a beverage and snack stream. Sometimes we do heavy hitting news like today. It's a lot of talk about snacks though. I would say that takes up a good 45% of the time. And it would be foolish not to thank official sponsor of the stream, the Coca-Cola Corporation, Diet Coke. Thank you for the support. The Coca-Cola Corporation, of course, co-signs and agrees with all the viewpoints that were expressed here on this program today. when the Coca-Cola Corporation contacted me and said, "Do you want to be an official spokesperson for Coca-Cola?" And I said, "Well, I would love that. I enjoy the product. I enjoy Diet Coke. I like to drink it. I find it refreshing. I like the little bit of caffeine, but the non too sweet taste. I do find it very enjoyable. But I got to tell you, on this program, I do say a lot of subversive things. I make comments that run contrary to mainstream media narratives when it comes to foreign affairs and foreign policy and
You can count on me.
geopolitics.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I tried to tell them about this. Thank you, Gothengel Center, for the 25 months of Prime as well. Thank you, Gothengel Center. I tried to warn them about this, and they said, no, we agree. We agree. We've been watching the stream. We agree with all this stuff. We agree with all the stuff you've been saying, and we wouldn't be sponsoring you if we didn't. So I was kind of like, all right, if that's what you think. I tried to protect them, but they didn't want to hear anything about it. So thank you again to the Coca-Cola Corporation. I just came from the Majority Report stream. Did you know that Emma doesn't like cheese? I got to say, that's pretty strange. We just had Emma on I do a podcast with my friend Jordan Ewell called the Insurgents Podcast. I recommend people check that out as well. We actually just did speak to Emma Vigeland on that podcast just the other day. That didn't come up. That to me is an indefensible take. I don't know what Emma's problem is, but that to me is fucked up and wrong. And I think she should apologize. Hot take: Coke Zero equals is better than Diet Coke. That is a hot take, narrator. I strongly disagree with that. I strongly disagree. I don't like the sugary sucralose flavor of Coke Zero. I think it's trying too hard to emulate the real Coke taste. And if I wanted to drink real Coke, I would just drink Coke. I want to drink Diet Coke because it doesn't taste like that. It's not so sweet. I do like cherry Coke Zero though. I will make that exception. I prefer Diet Coke, but I will enjoy a nice cherry Coke Zero sometimes. I don't agree with that, Natasha. Fake sugars are unhealthy. Real sugar is better. I don't agree with that. I think that's been a narrative that's been promoted by big sugar, the big sugar industry. And it wants you to they make you think that they want to take away your medicine. So you buy their cures, right? We invented all kinds of fake sugar that doesn't have the same kind of adverse health impacts as we know sugar does, causing diabetes, all kinds of other harmful health issues, sugar. Which has not been linked to aspartame or any other kind of like fake sugar product like that. That's all complete. That's a conspiracy. That's a big sugar conspiracy. But sugar is delicious. And I guess when it comes to soda though, it's not that sugar isn't delicious, but when I'm going to have sugar, I would rather eat like a muffin or like a dessert or ice cream or a desserty thing. I don't want to get 30 grams of sugar in a single can of soda though. Because I'm going to drink probably 3 or 4 of those throughout a day. Sometimes. You know how much, if those were all sugar, that would be like 80, 90 grams of sugar, like an insane amount of sugar. If I'm going to eat that much sugar, I would like to have an actual like desserty thing, a pastry or a pie, and something like that. I don't want my sugar in soda form. Give me a pixie stick, brother, straight up. Sugar can be bad for you if eaten in unmoderated amounts, which is why you should replace it with cancer juice, which is fine. No links have been made to cancer. This is all, you're just brainwashed pro-sugar propaganda. Surely there's a lot of things in our diet that do lead to cancers, and I think that's like microplastics and stuff. There's no microplastics in diet soda. In fact, it's mostly water. It's basically healthy for you. It's basically healthy. And there's Roundup in the corn syrup. What about that? We know sugar causes cancer or contributes to it. I bet the Coca-Cola Corporation would add even more microplastics if they thought it was profitable. I don't think, no, I almost called the Microplastic Corporation. That would be a foolish little mix up. But the Coca-Cola Corporation would never engage in any kind of adverse practices like that, sacrificing people's health, either with their products or engage in any kind of harmful behavior when it comes to their union activity in Latin America or elsewhere as well. They would never do anything like that. They would never engage in any of that kind of harmful activity. I'm not a fan of drinking soda, but I do like mineral water and carbonated caffeine-free soda like Squirt. Well, that's why that carbonated caffeine, it's okay. I'm a big Fresca enjoyer as well. And I do enjoy those flavored bubbly waters. I really enjoy the bubblies. That's my preferred brand of flavored fizzy water. I enjoy the pineapple. I enjoy the strawberry. I've been trying to switch to those, frankly, and drink more of those rather than soda sometimes. Fresca gang, hell yeah, risk inverse. This is why we're friends. This is why we're friends. The bubbly pineapple is very good. Am I the only person in the stream that prefers to drink water? Johnny, get out. I've had enough of your nonsense, Johnny, with your... I'm Johnny. I'm Subversive History, the cool Twitch stream that everyone should also subscribe to, watching this. Oh, I'm Johnny. I'm hydrated. Ooh, look at me. I drink water. That's what you sound like to me. That's what you sound like to me, Johnny. Well, folks, it's time for the goodbye music. It's time for the goodbye music. Folks, it's been a wonderful stream today, though. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning into the stream today. Please, once again, smash the follow button. If you want to support this content and join the community, if you like this kind of discourse, smash the follow button. And again, I will be coming back tomorrow at noon. Great episode of TRRS tomorrow with our friend Radio Free Amanda. It's going to be really, really good. So please come back for that one. She's going to be coming on tomorrow, 2 p.m. The show starts 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1 a.m. Pyongyang time. I will make an effort to be on time. Now that there's some potential new viewers and not the jokers and weirdos and freaks that are the regulars in this community, am I right? I can say anything to them and they're just going to come back anyways. They love it. I can say anything. I can say anything to them. And they'll thank me. Oh my goodness. I'm just joking, folks. We like to joke around on here. We like to joke around. We like to have fun. We like to have fun on here, right? So we're going to surprise our friend Dan Simpson with quite a raid here. But thanks again for tuning in, everyone. It's been great to hang out with you all today. The regulars, the new viewers, the lurkers, the hate watchers, the intelligence assets. Did it just not let me raid? Oh my fucking god. Marty, for some reason, Marty sometimes is the only person that can raid, including me. Because this is a great platform. There we go. I guess it works for Lodane as well. Don't ask me. Sometimes I get somehow signed out of Twitch and I can't do things. I'm like a prisoner to my own community. Thank you again, folks. Come back tomorrow, okay? Big episode tomorrow. It's going to be really great stuff. I'm Rob Rousseau. Goodbye. Still have like 30 seconds. Lodane, you can hit the button at any time. I'm just going to stare at the camera.
There it is.